Right now, as these words move through your mind, something is listening to them. Not your ears, not your brain in the ordinary sense. Something quieter, something that has been noticing every thought you've ever had without once introducing itself. You didn't invite it. You can't remember when it arrived. And yet, it has never left. Welcome. Settle in. Let the shoulders drop a little. If this kind of slow, wandering conversation is something you'd like to keep close, a soft tap of the subscribe button helps more of it find its way to you. For minds that don't switch off, for people like us who feel there is always something more underneath the words, the deeper end of this conversation continues in the quiet room on Patreon. The thoughts that don't quite fit here, the ones the algorithm gently buries, they live there. The link rests in the description whenever you're ready. Tonight, we drift towards something strange and familiar at once. The presence behind your thinking, the one who has been watching your thoughts arrive, stay a while, and leave. We won't try to name it too quickly. We'll just walk beside it, softly, until sleep takes the rest. Somewhere in the last few seconds, a thought appeared inside you. Maybe it was about the day behind you. Maybe a stray image, a face, a fragment of a song you haven't heard in years. You didn't schedule it. You didn't lift it into place. It simply arrived, the way weather arrives over a quiet field. If you slow down and watch this happen, something strange begins to reveal itself. Thoughts don't announce their approach. They don't ask permission. One moment there is only the soft hum of being awake, and the next, a fully formed idea is standing in the middle of your mind, as if it had always been there. We tend to assume we are the ones thinking, that each thought is a small decision, chosen and released. And yet, if you sit with the process closely, that assumption begins to loosen. Try, just for a moment, to predict your next thought before it comes. You'll find you can't. Whatever appears next will arrive on its own timing, from a place you cannot quite see. Researchers who study how the mind generates spontaneous ideas have noticed something quietly astonishing. Long before a thought reaches your awareness, patterns of activity are already unfolding in the brain, weaving fragments of memory, mood, and sensation into what will soon feel like a personal thought. By the time you notice it, the deeper machinery has already done most of the work. You meet the thought only at the last step, when it steps into the light, which invites a soft, disorienting question. If the thought was already forming before you were aware of it, in what sense did you think it? And who, or what, is the one who receives it when it finally arrives? Some have compared the mind to a quiet room with many doors. Ideas walk in from corridors you cannot see. You sit in the center, sometimes surprised, sometimes delighted, sometimes uneasy at what enters. You call these visitors my thoughts, and in a way they are yours. They wear your history, your language, your fears. Yet they were not built by the small self that greets them. There is something oddly freeing in this. If a thought arrived on its own, then it isn't quite an accusation, or a command, or a truth. It is more like a guest. You can look at it. You can let it pass. You don't have to believe everything that walks through the door. And still, beneath all of this, a deeper puzzle remains. Something in you notices the guest. Something registers its arrival, feels its weight, decides whether to follow it or let it drift away. That quiet noticing is older than the thought itself. It doesn't rush in with the visitor. It was already there, waiting, watching the door. Tonight, we are walking slowly toward that watcher, not to capture it, not to define it, only to acknowledge, for the first time in perhaps a long time, that it is here. It has been here through every uninvited thought, every anxious spiral at 2 a.m., every unexpected memory that surfaced while you were doing something else entirely. The thoughts you did not choose are the first small clue. They hint that the mind is not a single thing, but a layered presence, a stream, and something quietly standing beside the stream. In the sections ahead, we'll let that presence come a little closer, gently, without hurry. The way a shy animal steps into a clearing when it senses no one is trying to catch it. There is a voice inside your head. You know the one. It comments on the day, replays conversations, plans tomorrow, judges your posture, wonders if you locked the door. For most of your waking life, this voice has been so close to you that you may never have thought of it as a voice at all. It has felt like thinking itself. Now, listen for it. Not by trying to think, just by waiting. Within a few seconds, it will speak. Maybe about these very words. Maybe about something entirely unrelated. It does not need a subject. It only needs an opening. Almost everyone carries some form of this inner speaking. Some people hear it as clear sentences, almost like an actor reciting a script. Others experience it more as impressions, half-formed images with meaning attached. A small number of people report barely any inner voice at all, a quiet many others find hard to imagine. Whichever way it arrives, the phenomenon is old, universal, and strangely undernoticed by the very minds it lives inside. Neuroscientists, who peek into the brain while people talk to themselves, have found something gently revealing. The same regions that light up when we speak out loud, especially areas near what is often called Broca's region, hum softly during inner speech as well. It is as if the mind is quietly rehearsing, using the same instrument that shapes our spoken words, only without the breath, without the tongue moving. Language, it seems, is not just how we speak to others. It is one of the ways the brain speaks to itself. That in itself might not be surprising. What is stranger is this: the inner voice does not always feel authored. Try, right now, to make it say something specific. You can, of course, but then wait a moment and notice what comes next. That next line, the unbidden comment, the sudden observation. You didn't compose it. It arrived already dressed in your accent, already flavored with your memories, and yet no one at the desk of your conscious mind clicked send. Some researchers describe inner speech as a bridge between thinking and feeling, a way the mind explains itself to itself, a running commentary that helps stitch together experience into a story. On one hand, it is deeply useful. It lets us plan, rehearse, and imagine. On the other hand, it can become a small tyrant. When it repeats the same worry all night, or replays an old embarrassment, we suffer at the hands of a narrator we cannot quite silence. And here is the quiet twist. If the voice were truly you, you would be able to turn it off at will. You cannot. Try for even 30 seconds, and you'll notice how quickly it slips back in, sometimes even to comment on your attempt to quiet it. Yet in that very frustration, something else becomes visible. Because if the voice keeps talking without your permission, then you must be something other than the voice, something that hears it, something that gets tired of it, something that longs, occasionally, for a little peace beneath it. Some have described this as the difference between the speaker and the listener within the same mind. The narrator is loud, the listener is soft. The narrator rushes, the listener waits. And when the narrator finally pauses, while washing dishes, while walking on an empty street, in the second before sleep, the listener is still there, still open, still noticing that the noise has stopped. Tonight, as you drift, you don't need to silence the voice. That struggle rarely works. You can simply notice that there is one, and that something else, quieter and older, has always been the one hearing it. Consider what happens in the tiny interval between one thought ending and the next beginning. Not the pause you plan or the meditation you attempt, but the natural gap that already exists, dozens of times a minute, whether you notice it or not. Most of us treat the mind as a continuous stream, thought after thought, flowing without break, like a river that never rests. Yet if you slow the film of your attention, you'll find that the stream is not really continuous at all. It is more like a series of small, distinct arrivals. Each thought has an edge, a place where it forms, a place where it dissolves, and between these edges, there is space. That space is easy to miss. It is quiet. It has no shape. Nothing sells it. Nothing markets it. It does not compete for attention because it is not, in itself, a thing. Attention researchers who track the mind's rhythms have found that awareness itself pulses. Attention is not a steady beam like a flashlight held perfectly still. It flickers, samples, refreshes. Several times a second, your capacity to notice briefly loosens and reopens. Between the flickers, something remains, but the grip on any single thought quietly lets go. In those micro moments, the mind is neither holding the last thought nor grasping the next. It is simply available. If you slow down enough, you can almost feel it. There is a thought, perhaps about the day, or about these words. It rises, blooms, fades, and then, before the next one arrives, there is a soft breath of nothing. Not emptiness exactly, more like an open room, briefly unfurnished. And here is what makes this so quietly astonishing. Even in that gap, something is still present. You have not disappeared. Awareness has not blinked off. It is only that awareness is not currently pointed at anything. It is simply itself, open, untenanted, awake without content. The mind that panics at silence often skips over these gaps. It rushes from one thought to the next, terrified of the tiny stillness in between, as if a moment without commentary would be a moment without existence. But of course, existence does not depend on commentary. You were here before your first word. You were here between your last two breaths. You are here in the pauses between the sentences you are hearing now. Some contemplative traditions have spent centuries pointing to this gap, not because it contains a secret, but because it contains the one who has been present the whole time. When the noise is on, the noise gets the credit. When the noise briefly lifts, the underlying stillness reveals what was there beneath it all along. You don't have to reach for it. That is part of the wonder. The space between two thoughts is not something you build. It is a natural feature of your inner architecture. It is happening whether you look at it or not. Even in the busiest mind, the pulses of awareness continue. Even in the loudest storm, small gaps of quiet flicker through, unnoticed but real. Perhaps this is why so many people describe moments of unexpected calm, while looking out a window, while pouring a glass of water, while lying in bed just before sleep. It isn't that the mind stopped. It is that, for a moment, they noticed the space that had always been there. Tonight, you don't have to try to widen these gaps. You don't have to still the mind. You can simply, gently, let yourself become curious about the small silences that are already inside your thinking. Because whatever fills the pauses, whatever is present when nothing is happening, is closer to the watcher than any thought could ever be. Try something small. Turn your attention toward the one who is paying attention, not toward a thought, not toward a feeling, toward whatever is doing the noticing itself. What happens? For most people, something strange occurs. The moment they try to look directly at the looker seems to slip aside. Attention wants to land on an object. It finds something to think about instead. A memory of an old teacher who mentioned this. A sensation in the shoulders, a passing wonder about whether they are doing it right. But the thing itself, the pure act of awareness, refuses to become an image. It is a little like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. You can look everywhere they look, but you cannot turn them fully around on themselves. The seeing cannot become the seen without ceasing to be seeing. Philosophers have circled this puzzle for a very long time, though it rarely reaches everyday conversation. Some have called it the reflexivity problem, the strange difficulty of an observing mind that tries to observe itself. Others have simply said that consciousness is more like a light than a lit object. It illuminates everything else, but casts no shadow of its own. Modern research into introspection has quietly confirmed how limited our inner sight really is. When people are asked to report what is happening in their minds, they can often describe the content, a thought, a feeling, an image. But they struggle to describe the process. They cannot say, in any precise way, how the thought arrived, or where the emotion was manufactured, or what the awareness noticing all of it is actually made of. The mirror shows us what is in front of it, but not the glass itself. Some scientists study what they call metacognition, the mind thinking about its own thinking. It turns out we do this quite a lot. We monitor whether we understand something, whether we might be wrong, whether our memory can be trusted. Yet even this careful self-watching seems to happen through a filter. It reports about the mind, from within the mind, without ever quite catching the mind at work. This is the quiet wonder. The very tool that would examine consciousness is consciousness. There is no separate perch to stand on, no outside vantage point. Whatever is doing the looking is also, somehow, the thing being looked for, and still, something is here. Even if it will not sit for a portrait, something is receiving these very words. Something is noticing the small movements of your body against the surface beneath you. Something is aware of the difference between light and dark behind your closed eyes, between the room and the sounds beyond it. This presence is undeniable in its effect. even if it refuses definition. Some have compared it to the space in a room. You cannot see the space by itself. You only see the objects inside it. Yet the space is what makes the room possible. Without it, there would be nowhere for the furniture to be. In the same way, the watcher is not a thing among your thoughts. It is the openness in which thoughts can occur. There is something gentle in accepting this. You do not have to catch the watcher. You are not failing when it slips away from your inspection. That is simply its nature, like a fish that cannot see the water it swims in. Awareness cannot easily see the awareness it swims in, but the water is still there, and the fish is still swimming. And the moment you stop trying to grip it, something in you softens, because you realize that whatever this is, you do not need to hold it. It is holding you. Somewhere in the early years of your life, something quietly extraordinary happened. It didn't make the news. No one wrote it down. Yet in that unremembered moment, you crossed a threshold that shapes everything you now think of as yourself. You noticed that you were noticing. Before that moment, experience simply happened. Warmth, hunger, faces, sounds. The world flowed in, but somewhere, perhaps around the age of 18 months to 2 years, something new began to stir. A small child looking in a mirror suddenly understood that the reflection was themselves. A toddler who saw a smudge on their nose reached up to touch their own face instead of the glass. From then on, a new inhabitant had moved in, the sense of being a someone who could be seen. Developmental researchers who study this transition often speak of the mirror recognition test as one of its earliest markers. Only a small handful of species show anything similar. Somewhere in early childhood, human infants add this quiet layer of self-awareness on top of raw experience. And once it arrives, it doesn't leave. Yet even this framing may be too simple, because underneath the recognition of "that is me in the mirror," another, subtler shift is occurring. The child is not only realizing that they have a face, they are beginning to feel that there is a they at all, a center, a witness who can be pointed to, a someone who now belongs to the sentence, "I am here." Try, if you can, to imagine a time before this, a time when there was experience, but no clear reporter of the experience, a time when hunger simply was, not "I am hungry." It is nearly impossible to recall, because memory itself seems to depend on the very self-awareness that came online. In some sense, you cannot remember life before the watcher, because there was no one there to write the diary. Some have described this as the moment the mind quietly folded on itself, like paper that suddenly becomes aware of its own edges. Before that, experience was one layer. After that, there were two, the events and the one who registers them. And once that second layer arrived, it began recording, turning a scatter of moments into what would slowly become a life story. There is a soft strangeness in realizing this. The watcher you meet tonight is not a new arrival. It stepped into your life so early that it feels like it has always been you. And in a way, it has. But it also had a beginning. It grew alongside language, alongside memory, alongside the slow assembly of what we call personality. This is why, later in life, when someone asks, "Who am I really?" the question can feel dizzying. The very I doing the asking was assembled long ago from 1,000 small experiences no one still remembers. You are the child who first pointed at the mirror. You are also whatever was already alive in that child before the pointing began. Some traditions treat this deeper layer with particular reverence. The one who was there before the mirror knew itself, the presence that felt warmth and hunger and heartbeat before it had any story to tell about them. That presence, some have wondered, might be closer to the true watcher than the tidy self we now carry around. None of this is meant to unsettle you, quite the opposite. There is something oddly comforting in remembering that the sense of being a separate self is not the ground floor of you. Beneath it, gentler and older, is a simple aliveness that needed no name to exist. Tonight, as thoughts drift and the day loosens, that older layer is still there, underneath the biography, underneath the worries, underneath the small child who once looked in the mirror and, without knowing it, met themselves for the first time. Notice a thought right now. Any thought, perhaps about the room, the day, a face, a small hope. Watch it briefly. And now, notice this. Something in you knew the thought was there. That knowing is not the same as the thought. This is easy to miss, because the two happen so close together they feel like one movement. But there is a subtle seam. On one side, the raw thought, a shape, a sentence, an image. On the other side, the awareness that a thought has occurred. Two layers, arriving almost at once. Many creatures, we suspect, think in some form. A dog problem solves, a crow plans, a cat calculates the leap. Thinking, in that basic sense, seems widespread in the living world. But knowing that one is thinking, being aware of one's own awareness, appears to be much rarer, and in humans, it is unusually developed. Philosophers have long distinguished between what they call first-order and higher-order awareness. First-order awareness is the plain experience, hearing a sound, seeing a color, feeling a mood. Higher-order awareness is knowing you are hearing, knowing you are seeing, knowing you are feeling. It is the second glance that turns experience into something we can reflect upon. Some theories of consciousness suggest that this second layer is what makes an experience feel truly conscious in the way we usually mean the word. Without it, there might be perception without a perceiver, sensation without a self. With it, the ordinary hum of being alive becomes, quietly, a life that knows itself. Yet this is offered as one possibility among several. Other thinkers gently disagree. Some believe the higher order layer is more of a reporting mechanism than the source of consciousness itself. Others suspect the two layers might not really be separate at all, that awareness and awareness of awareness are more like different views of the same underlying happening. The truth here remains open, and probably will for a long time. What we can say, softly and honestly, is that both layers seem to be here in you, right now. There is thinking, and there is knowing you are thinking. There is worry, and there is the quiet noticing that worry has entered the room. When the worry passes, the noticing does not pass with it. When the thought fades, the awareness that saw it fade is still, somehow, present. This is one of the reasons why the watcher can feel so intimate, and yet so mysterious. It is not another thought, it is the seeing of thoughts. And because seeing does not have a shape, it is easy to overlook. We tend to notice the content of experience, the color, the sound, the story, and forget to notice the noticing itself. There is a small kindness in this distinction, especially at night. If you are thinking anxious thoughts, you might feel as though the anxiety is the whole of you, but it isn't. Something in you is aware of the anxiety, and that something is not itself anxious, it is simply attentive. The waves may rock the boat, but the sea has not become the waves. Some contemplative teachers speak of this as resting as the knower, rather than the known. Not disappearing into every thought that arrives, but staying with the quieter presence that greets each one. It is not a technique so much as a small change in emphasis, a gentle recognition that you are not required to identify with every mental event that passes through. Tonight, as we move deeper, you can carry this small distinction with you, not as a rule, not as a discipline, only as a light noticing. Thinking is happening, and something is knowing that thinking is happening. And that knowing, quiet and unhurried, is closer to who you are than any single thought could ever be. Imagine lying down at the end of a long day, with no task in front of you, no message to answer, nothing to hold in your hands. The room is quiet, your body is still, and yet, inside your head, something is very much alive. The mind is not empty. It is drifting, wandering, remembering, planning, wondering about tomorrow, replaying yesterday. Rest, it turns out, has its own busy weather. For a long time, scientists studying the brain assumed that when a person was not doing anything in particular, the brain would grow quieter, waiting until it was needed again. In the late 20th century, a soft surprise began to emerge from their scans. When people rested, when they were simply lying still, not engaged in any specific task, a particular network of brain regions did not calm down. It lit up, consistently, almost as if the mind had a separate life it lived precisely when nothing else was demanding its attention. This network came to be called the default mode. It was named that because it seemed to be what the brain returned to by default, whenever it wasn't busy with the outside world. It hums when we daydream. It stirs when we recall the past or imagine the future. It quietly gathers together the strands of who we think we are, weaving a running self-story out of memory, expectation, and imagination. You have felt this network at work more often than you realize. In the shower, in line at a shop, waiting for a kettle to boil, standing at a window when the light is fading. In those moments, without asking, your mind drifts. It replays a small conversation from last week. It rehearses something you might say tomorrow. It wanders through half-forgotten rooms of memory, then loops back to something you had almost forgotten to feel. Researchers who have studied mind wandering have found that this drifting is not the exception, it is arguably the rule. A large portion of ordinary waking life is spent not in the here and now, but in some elsewhere the mind quietly builds when the outside world is not pulling on it. The proportion varies from person to person, but for many, it appears to occupy a startling share of the day. There is something gently uncanny about this. The mind at rest is not resting in the way we might have imagined. It is composing, it is stitching, it is walking through a small internal city that only it can see. Even in the middle of a peaceful evening, when everything looks still, an inner narration is at work, refreshing the sense of who you are, and here is where the puzzle deepens. This default mode network is one of the closest things neuroscientists have found to a physical seat of the self-story. When people think about themselves, remember personal experiences, or imagine themselves in future situations, this network becomes more active. When they are absorbed in a task that pulls them out of themselves, like a challenging game, a piece of skilled work, or a moment of deep flow, the network quiets. In those absorbed moments, people often report feeling less like a separate me and more like the activity itself. Some scientists have gently wondered whether the default mode is, in a sense, the machinery of self-referential thinking. A humming loom that keeps weaving the fabric of I. When it slows down, the fabric loosens. When it speeds up, especially in patterns that circle back on themselves, we experience the endless self-commentary that can turn a quiet night into an exhausting one. Yet the picture is more layered than that, because even when this network is humming, something is watching it hum. When you notice, as you may be noticing now, that your mind has drifted, who is the one who caught it wandering? The default mode may generate the story of self, but the awareness of the story is something else, quieter, prior, and less easy to locate on a scan. Some researchers who study meditation have gently observed that experienced contemplatives show unusual patterns in this network. It can quiet, or reorganize, or engage differently. Their sense of self does not vanish, but it seems to loosen its grip. Whatever the watcher is, it does not seem to require the default mode's constant activity to remain present. Presence continues, even as the storyteller pauses. For those of us who lie awake at night with a mind that will not settle, this is quietly reassuring. The buzzing you notice at 1 a.m. is not proof that you are broken. It is your default mode doing what it has always done, pulling threads, replaying, imagining, stitching. It is a feature of a resting brain, not a flaw of a tired one. And yet, alongside the buzzing, something else is also present, the one who notices the buzzing, the one who sighs, softly, and reaches for a slower breath. That noticing is not part of the noise. It is the space in which the noise appears. Even the busiest mind is not fully filled. Between the strands of default mode weather, there are small openings, small silences, small returns to something older and calmer. Tonight, as thoughts drift on their own accord, you can simply allow it. The mind may still be talking, that is what it does, but something in you can rest as the listener, rather than the listed, and that quiet listener has been here all along, even in the busiest hum of your inner life. There is a strange puzzle hiding inside the simple question, how was your day? You know the moment. Someone asks it kindly, and you pause. You reach not for what your day actually felt like moment by moment, but for a quick summary, a headline. Was it good? Was it hard? A single word or two rises up, and you offer it, and the conversation moves on. Yet if you played the day back second by second, you might find a very different story than the one you told. Small pleasures you didn't count, long stretches of neutral time, a brief frustration that colored the whole memory even though it lasted only a minute. What you reported was not what you experienced. It was what you remembered. Some psychologists have described this as a quiet split running through each of us. Two different selves sharing the same body. The experiencing self, who lives inside every present moment, and the remembering self, who edits those moments into a story and reports on them later. They are so close that we usually take them for one. But when you look carefully, they do not quite agree. The experiencing self is the one having the shower right now, feeling warm water on the shoulders, the one hearing a bird outside, the one noticing the small pull of an old worry as it drifts through. It lives in a series of tiny nows, one after another, most of which will never be remembered. In fact, the vast majority of your life passes through this self and is quietly forgotten. Only a fraction is captured. Only a fraction becomes memory. The remembering self does something different. It stitches selected moments into a narrative. It often gives disproportionate weight to peaks, the most intense parts, and to endings. Studies of how people recall experiences have shown, gently and repeatedly, that a shorter, more painful experience can be remembered as worse than a longer, less painful one, if it ended badly, and a long, mostly pleasant experience can be remembered as merely okay if the ending was flat. The remembering self isn't lying, it is summarizing, but it summarizes with its own preferences, and we rarely notice them. Here is where it becomes softly disorienting. Most of the decisions we make about our own lives are made by the remembering self. When we ask, "Was that trip worth it?" or "Did I enjoy that job?" we consult the story, not the raw experience. We plan our futures based on how we imagine we will remember them, more than how we will actually feel each moment while they happen. In that sense, the remembering self is often the one steering, while the experiencing self simply lives. And yet, when you look for the true watcher of your life, neither of these seems quite it. The experiencing self is the surface where feelings arise. The remembering self is the writer who edits the surface into a story. But something else is quietly present in both. Something is aware of the water on the shoulders when it happens. Something is also aware, later, of the story being told about the shower. Both selves show up in awareness. Awareness itself is neither of them. Some have gently wondered whether the watcher is closer to the experiencing self than the remembering one. A simple, moment-by-moment aliveness that has no interest in editing. Others have suggested it is neither, but the quiet space in which both selves rise and fall. Either way, the discovery of these two selves points to something important. You are not a single, seamless I. You are, at the very least, a small collaboration between the one who lives and the one who remembers. There is real relief in noticing this. If you have ever felt haunted by a memory, ask yourself gently who is remembering. The remembering self holds the story, but the experiencing self is no longer inside it. The moment itself has passed. What remains is a construction, useful in some ways, painful in others, but not the raw event. And even the construction is being witnessed by something that is neither the past experience nor the present memory. Something quiet. Something still open. Some traditions have suggested that suffering often arises not in the experiencing self, but in the remembering self's endless replaying. The moment burns for a second. The story of the moment can burn for years if it is fed, and the fuel is often our confusion between the two. We treat the story as if it were the ongoing event. We defend it, argue with it, relive it, when in truth the original moment has long since dissolved, which invites a very soft, very careful practice. When the mind offers you a memory, especially at night, you can notice which self is speaking. Is this a raw feeling arising now, or a story being reassembled from selected fragments? Both are worthy of attention, but they are not the same. And underneath both, the watcher is still here, holding the space in which either can arise. For sleepless nights, this can be a small comfort. The story looping in your head is not a live broadcast. It is a rerun assembled by a self that specializes in reruns. The experiencing self, right now, is only feeling this pillow, this breath, this weight of the day settling into the body, and the watcher, deeper still, is simply here, aware of both, asking nothing, needing no version to be the final one. The story is not the life is not the story, and you are, more likely than not, something quieter than either. Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself thinking. Where do you imagine the thinker sits? For many people, without quite meaning to, they picture a small self behind their forehead, somewhere between the eyes, looking out through the face as if it were a window, a pilot in a cockpit, a little person watching the screens. It is a natural picture, and it is almost entirely wrong. There is no such control room in the brain, no small chamber where a single self sits reading the reports of the senses and issuing commands. When scientists carefully map the brain's activity while a person thinks, feels, or decides, they do not find one glowing center where everything comes together. They find something much stranger and much more beautiful. They find a web. The brain is a vast, interconnected network, somewhere in the neighborhood of 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, communicating through a shimmering flurry of chemical and electrical signals. Vision does not happen in one spot. It happens across many regions, working in parallel, some detecting edges, some tracking motion, some recognizing faces, some sensing color, all somehow woven into the seamless experience of seeing. Memory is not a single filing cabinet, but a distributed pattern that resurrects itself, slightly differently, every time it is remembered. Decisions, too, do not seem to come from one place. Different regions offer different pulls, a habit here, an emotion there, a rational plan somewhere else. Somehow, from this quiet negotiation, an action arises, and when it does, we experience it as ours. We say, "I decided," but no one has ever found a single decider inside the brain. What has been found is a pattern, a conversation, a convergence. This is one of the quiet wonders of modern neuroscience. The unity of your experience, the feeling of being one person, in one moment, with one point of view, is not because there is one small self holding it all together. It is because a vast, distributed system produces the seamless illusion of a single center. The show feels unified because the stagecraft is superb, but behind the curtain, it is many hands. Some scientists have proposed frameworks to explain how so many parallel processes could give rise to a single integrated experience. One idea gently suggests that consciousness may arise when information is bound together in particular ways, when many parts of the system share a rich common state that no single part alone contains. Others suggest that certain patterns of communication across the brain might act like a shared workspace, allowing different regions to broadcast to the whole. These remain proposals, honest attempts to describe something that still evades a full explanation, but they all share one intuition: unity in the brain is an achievement, not a starting point. There is something quietly liberating about this. If your sense of being a single self is generated by a whole network, then that self is not a fixed object. It is a process, a slow river of moments, shifting, adjusting, sometimes coherent, sometimes contradictory. On some days you might feel almost like several people crammed into one body, a version of you that wants to sleep, and a version that wants to keep thinking, a version that longs for connection, and a version that hides. Both are true, both are running through the same network, and both are being noticed by something quieter still. The watcher, whatever it is, does not sit in one place. Just as the seen image of a landscape does not sit in one particular molecule of your eye, the experience of being aware may not sit in one particular neuron. It appears to emerge from the whole, or perhaps it is what the whole feels like from inside. Some have imagined the brain as an orchestra. No single instrument is the music. Not the violin, not the drums, not the flute. The music is what happens when they play together, and the listener within, well, the listener may not be another musician. It may be the very act of the orchestra hearing itself. This is speculation, of course. The nature of that hearing is not something we can fully explain yet, and perhaps never will. But the very fact that there is no small pilot in the cockpit does not mean that there is no experience. It means that experience is something the whole system does, not something a small part of it produces. Tonight, as you rest, you can quietly loosen the old picture of the little self behind the eyes. Nothing is hiding in there. Nothing needs to be defended. The you that feels so central is more like a beautiful pattern than a fixed point, a pattern that will still be here tomorrow, and can afford, for a few hours, to soften. Something in you is aware of this softening. That awareness has no address. It does not sit anywhere in particular. It seems to be everywhere at once, or perhaps nowhere at all, and still, undeniably, here. Notice the weight of your body against whatever is beneath you. The small pressure at the shoulders, the hips, the back of the head. Notice your breath, without changing it. Notice the temperature of the air on your face. This whole quiet register of information is happening constantly, whether you attend to it or not. For most of our lives, we treat the body as a vehicle, a thing that carries the mind around. The mind, we imagine, does the thinking. The body simply obeys. But look closely, and this picture starts to soften. The body, it turns out, is thinking too. Or at least, it is doing something remarkably like thinking, in its own quiet language. There is a slow flow of information coming from inside the body, from the heart, the lungs, the gut, the muscles, telling the brain what is happening beneath the skin. This inward sensing has a name in the sciences: interoception. It is the sense we have of our own inner state, the sense that lets us feel hungry, or tired, or nervous, or peaceful, without needing to be told. Interoception is easy to overlook because it is usually silent, yet it is deeply woven into how we experience the world. When you meet someone who unsettles you, a small tightening happens in the chest or stomach before any thought explains why. When you enter a familiar place that feels safe, a soft loosening moves through the shoulders before any story is told. The body notices first, the mind, sometimes much later, tries to catch up. Some researchers have gently proposed that emotions themselves may be, in part, the mind's reading of these inner bodily signals. A racing heart, a tightening throat, a settled belly. The brain gathers these signals and, based on context, offers a label. Anxiety, perhaps, or excitement, or grief, or love. If the same racing heart appeared while on a roller coaster, the brain might call it thrill. If it appeared before a difficult conversation, it might call it fear. The body offers the notes. The mind writes the melody. This suggests something quietly astonishing. The watcher we have been walking toward may not be perched above the neck at all. It may be spread through the whole living being. Every cell that participates in the internal conversation of the body may contribute, in some subtle way, to the felt sense of being alive. The gut, with its own vast network of neurons, communicates with the brain in ways scientists are only beginning to understand. The heart's rhythms send steady signals upward, subtly shaping mood, attention, and even the way we perceive time. What we call our mind may be far more like a whole-body event than a single organ performance. Consider what happens when you have a strong intuition, a sense that something is right, or wrong, or somehow off. Often it is not a thought that comes first. It is a feeling, low in the chest, or a small quiet in the gut, or a warmth spreading through the shoulders. Only later does the mind try to translate this into words. In many cases, the body knew before the mind understood. There is a soft mystery in this. We tend to imagine understanding as something done by the intellect, a bright, focused process of reasoning. But some of the deepest recognitions in a life do not arrive through argument. They arrive through the body, the knowing that a friendship is over, a sense that a certain path is not for you, a quiet certainty that this moment is safe, or beautiful, or sacred. The mind offers explanations, the body offers something older, a direct participation in the truth of the moment. This is why, when the mind is loud with anxious thoughts, one of the gentlest returns is through the body, not by arguing with the thoughts, not by defeating them, but by lowering attention into the breath, into the palms, into the soles of the feet. In doing so, you are not escaping the mind, you are widening it. You are including the parts of yourself that were quietly here all along, unheard beneath the noise. Some contemplative traditions have long held this quiet wisdom. They speak of a heart-mind, or a body-mind, a single field of awareness that includes far more than the head. Modern science, in its careful way, is beginning to echo something similar. Whatever consciousness is, it does not seem to be sealed inside the skull. It seems to hum through the whole living organism, drawing on signals from every layer of the body. If that is true, then the watcher is not floating above your life like a small ghost. It is written into the way your heart beats when you see someone you love, into the way your stomach tightens at bad news, into the slow deepening of breath that arrives when a body senses, before the mind does, that it is safe. Tonight, as you rest, notice how the body already knows how to soften. It knows how to sink. It knows how to let go. It has known these things since long before you were old enough to have opinions about them. The mind, at last, is simply catching up to what the body has been doing all along. Perhaps the watcher is not a lonely presence behind the eyes. Perhaps it is the whole living you, quietly aware of itself, from every corner at once. There is a small, almost invisible gap in every conscious moment of your life. It is so brief you have never noticed it, and yet, if it were revealed to you clearly, it might quietly change how you think about yourself. The gap is a delay, a tiny lag between when something happens in your brain and when you become aware of it. Consider the simple act of raising a hand. It feels instantaneous. You decide, and the hand rises. But when scientists have studied this movement carefully, using recordings of brain activity, they have found something remarkable. Preparatory patterns of activity begin in the brain a fraction of a second before the person reports the conscious decision to move. In other words, the brain has already started preparing before the deciding self even knows what it wants to do. This finding, sometimes called the readiness potential, has been discussed and debated for decades. Some see it as evidence that our conscious sense of choice is more of a report than a command, that decisions bubble up from deeper processes we cannot see, and only later are labeled as ours. Others urge caution, pointing out that the story is more complicated. The signals are subtle, the interpretations vary. What we can say with some care is that the mind does not seem to work in the tidy, linear way we imagined. Awareness arrives after the machinery has already been humming. Whatever the full explanation turns out to be, one thing is quietly clear. The you that experiences making a decision is not the same as the you that first initiates the process. There is a lag, and in that lag, an entire hidden layer of mental life is happening. You can feel a hint of this in everyday moments. Consider the flash of humor when someone says something funny. The laughter often begins before you understand why, or the way a word leaves your mouth in an argument, and only afterward does the mind catch up and think, "Why did I say that?" Or the way a musician's fingers move faster than any conscious thought could direct, playing complicated patterns as if the hand itself knew the music. In each case, something in you is acting, and the conscious watcher is arriving slightly late, in time to notice, but not always in time to plan. This is dizzying if you press on it too hard, so let it be gentle instead. The lag does not mean you are not present. It means that presence is subtler than we thought. Awareness, it seems, is not the source of every action. It is more like an observer who catches up quickly enough that the story feels seamless. In fact, the seamlessness is part of what the brain works so hard to produce. Underneath the smooth surface, small delays and reconstructions are constantly being smoothed over, so that experience feels like a continuous flow. There is even evidence that the brain sometimes backdates our experiences, slightly rearranging when we felt things so that they align with what actually happened. If two signals arrive very close together, the mind may adjust their apparent timing so that the story makes sense. In a way, your experience of now is not exactly now. It is a gently edited version of a slightly earlier now, packaged and delivered with the timestamp updated. This might sound unsettling at first, but there is a quiet wonder in it as well. It means that your sense of being present has been carefully composed for you by a brain that is doing its best to make a coherent world out of 1,000 streams of information. The seamless here and now you feel is a small triumph of biological storytelling, and here is the softer twist. If awareness sometimes arrives after the action, then the sense of authorship we feel, the sense that we chose, we decided, we did, might not be the whole story. Some part of us, deeper and quieter, may have been at work long before the conscious I claimed the credit. What we call decision might be closer to noticing than to commanding. This does not have to threaten meaning. It does not empty life of importance. If anything, it invites humility. The you who is choosing to breathe more slowly right now, choosing to let the day loosen, choosing to sink toward rest, that you is participating in something vast, a hidden underweb of processes, all working together, all somehow yielding, at the last step, this quiet awareness that notices it happening. Some have wondered whether the watcher lives in the delay itself, whether awareness is precisely the space between the raw event and its felt arrival. A tiny pocket of time in which the brain's activity turns into the felt shape of experience. If so, the watcher is not slow. It is exactly on time. It is the very act of things becoming known. Tonight, as the body rests and the mind slowly hushes, you don't have to catch up to anything. You are already here, moment by moment, arriving softly into each breath. Even if the arrival is a fraction of a second later than the cause, it is still an arrival. And the presence that greets each moment is what has been waiting, without hurry, all along. The room grows dark, the eyes close, the body begins its slow slide into sleep, and somewhere in the next hour or so, something extraordinary quietly begins. You start to dream. In a dream, entire worlds are built out of nothing you can see. Places you have never been, faces you have never met, conversations that never happened. The rules of physics soften, time bends. You may fly, or fall, or find yourself walking down a hallway that shifts each time you glance at it. And through most of this, you accept it all without question. It feels real, because the watcher in you is there, receiving it, without doubting. This is one of the quieter mysteries of sleep. Consciousness does not simply switch off when the body rests. It changes form, especially during the phase of sleep known as REM, rapid eye movement. The brain becomes remarkably active, in some ways as active as when you are awake. Vivid experiences unfold, emotions are felt, memories are stitched into new patterns, and something is present through it all, noticing. What is that something? During most dreams, it seems to forget itself. It slips into whatever role the dream provides. If the dream places you in a school hallway, you are that student, worrying about a test that does not exist. If the dream places you at a wedding of someone you don't quite recognize, you are the guest, feeling every awkwardness. The watcher is there, but it has stopped noticing that it is watching. It has become the character, and then, sometimes, something unusual happens. In a small fraction of dreams, the watcher gently wakes up inside the dream. It notices. It says, silently, "Wait, this is a dream." The world of the dream does not disappear, but suddenly the dreamer knows that they are dreaming. Researchers call this lucid dreaming, and it points to something intriguing about the presence inside us, because even inside a dream, awareness can catch itself. Even without a body to anchor it, without a familiar world to ground it, some layer of noticing can suddenly recognize its own situation. This is a hint that the watcher does not depend on ordinary reality to exist. It can arrive in constructed worlds too, worlds built by the sleeping brain out of memory and imagination. Modern research on dreaming has quietly revealed how much internal activity supports these experiences. Networks in the brain that normally distinguish self from other, real from imagined, become organized differently during REM sleep. Regions that ordinarily help with reality checking are less active, which is part of why dreams can be so vivid and yet so strange. Meanwhile, emotional centers hum, memory systems shift, and something like a whole small life plays out inside a mind that from the outside appears perfectly still. Consider the strangeness of that. Your body is in a quiet room, motionless in bed, and yet, from the inside, you are climbing a staircase in a city that has never existed, having a conversation with someone who has never lived, feeling emotions that leave real traces in your morning mood. The whole show is generated internally, and still, awareness is there, riding it, sometimes forgetting itself, sometimes glimpsing its own presence. Some traditions have taken this seriously as a spiritual clue. If awareness can appear in worlds built entirely by the mind, then awareness itself may be more fundamental than any particular world. It is not the world that produces the watcher. It is the watcher, more likely than not, that lights up whatever world it finds itself in. Whether the world is made of stone, or of sensations, or of dream images, the watching quality remains. There is another quiet observation. In deep, dreamless sleep, something unusual seems to happen. Most people report no experience at all from those hours. It is as if the watcher, too, has fallen asleep. Yet upon waking, we do not usually feel that we ceased to exist. We simply notice a gap, and then continuity resumes. Some have wondered whether the watcher truly disappears in deep sleep, or whether it simply rests in a mode that leaves no memories behind. The difference matters, but the answer is difficult to test from within a mind that only reports upon waking. Contemplatives from a variety of traditions have proposed that a subtle presence remains even in the deepest sleep, that the sense of "I was there during the night," even without stories to attach to it, hints at something that never fully switches off. This remains a matter of gentle debate rather than settled science, but it is offered here as one of the many quiet possibilities. Whatever the deeper truth, the presence you know when you are awake, the presence that has been walking beside these words tonight, is also the presence that will accompany you into dream. It may become forgetful, it may become tangled in imagined stories, it may, occasionally, notice itself in the middle of a dream and quietly smile. But it will be there. It was there last night. It has been there every night of your life, whether you remember it or not. There is something deeply comforting in this. Sleep is not, as we sometimes fear, a nightly disappearance. It is a change in the shape of experience. The watcher, in its own soft way, is going on a journey inside itself. And when you wake up tomorrow, the watcher will still be here, meeting the morning as it has met every morning before this one, without effort, without introduction, simply present. Tonight, you can let go into that. The world of the dream is safe. The watcher goes with you, and whatever it is, it seems to know, without being taught, how to rest inside every kind of experience, waking, dreaming, and the still deep quiet in between. Long before microscopes, long before brain scans, long before anyone had a word for neurons, human beings were already asking a strange and beautiful question. Who is the one behind the eyes? Who is watching the day happen? Who remains quietly when the noise of the mind eventually softens? Different cultures, in different centuries, arrived at surprisingly similar intuitions. Sitting in caves, in temples, in forest clearings, in candlelit rooms, people looked inward and reported something. They did not always agree on what to call it, but many of them described, in their own languages, a still presence beneath the movement of thought, an unmoving witness, a silent seer. In some traditions of India, this presence was given names like the witness self, not a soul with personality, not a small being with preferences, but a quiet awareness in which everything else appears. Thoughts arise in it, emotions arise in it, the whole world of experience arises in it, and it, itself, does not arise, it does not come and go, it simply is. In parts of the Taoist tradition, something similar was noticed. Beneath the 10,000 things, there is a stillness, a vast openness that does not need to be added to. When the mind becomes very quiet, this stillness reveals itself, not as a discovery of something new, but as a recognition of what was always there. Contemplatives in the Christian, Jewish, Islamic, and other spiritual paths have used their own languages to circle a similar intuition, a ground of being, a deep silence beneath prayer, a presence that hosts the soul's turning. The words differ, the specifics differ, but something in the human being seems to sense, again and again, a still presence within, one that does not belong to the everyday self. Modern science does not usually speak in these terms, yet even in modern research, hints of this old intuition appear. Studies of long-term meditators sometimes describe a shift in their reported experience of self. The busy, story-driven self loosens. Something more open, more still, seems to become more prominent. It doesn't replace ordinary functioning. People still eat, work, love, worry, but they describe a quieter background awareness in which all this now unfolds. Neuroscientists cannot yet directly measure such an inner sense. What they can measure are changes in patterns of brain activity, shifts in the default mode network, subtle alterations in how the sense of self is constructed, moment by moment. These findings do not confirm any particular philosophical claim, but they gently remind us that the way the self is experienced is more flexible than we often assume. Under certain conditions, the tight little I softens and something else, less easily named, seems to remain. It is worth pausing here to acknowledge how remarkable this is. Across continents, without communication between them. Across many centuries, human beings looking inward have reported some form of a quiet witness. This does not prove such a witness exists in an absolute sense, but it suggests that when human minds go looking deeply into themselves, they tend to bump into something that feels similar, something present, something unmoving, something that watches without judging. Some have wondered whether this recurring discovery is a reflection of a common underlying reality. Others have suggested it might be a natural feature of how the human mind, upon deep introspection, tends to reorganize itself. Both possibilities are worth holding gently. The point tonight is not to decide between them, but to notice that this old intuition is neither strange nor unique to any one culture. It is one of the oldest human observations we have, and it is worth adding, softly, that these traditions were not usually claiming to explain everything. Many of them were quite comfortable acknowledging that the deepest questions about ultimate origin, about the nature of the whole, remain beyond human understanding. They spoke of a silent presence within, without pretending that this presence answered every question. They lived with mystery, and they seemed to find it comforting. Perhaps that is one of the quiet gifts of these ancient reflections. They do not require you to believe anything specific. They only invite you to notice something for yourself, not through argument, not through faith in someone else's report, but through gently turning attention inward and seeing what remains when the noise softens. You may not find a dramatic revelation. You may only notice a subtle stillness beneath the day's stir. That is enough. That is, in many traditions, exactly the beginning. The silent seer is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is simply there, and it becomes more noticeable as we grow more still. Tonight, without needing any particular belief, you can rest in the possibility that something quiet has been within you all along, something that saw your first day, something that will see this last thought of the evening, something that does not depend on the culture you were born into or the words you use to be what it is. The ancients, in their own languages, seem to have known it, and so, in your own way, do you. Here is a small experiment. Look, for a moment, at anything red, a wall, a book, an image behind your closed eyes. Now try to describe precisely what redness itself is like, not the wavelength, not the light, but the felt quality of red as it appears to you. You will find that words fail almost immediately. You can say it is warm, or vivid, or attention-catching. You can compare it to fire, or blood, or love, but the actual quality, the redness of red, resists description. It is something you know only by experiencing it. If someone had never seen red, no book, no equation, no explanation would give them the actual feel of it. They would have to see it themselves. Philosophers have given a name to these felt qualities of experience. They call them qualia, the redness of red, the wetness of water, the saltiness of tears, the particular ache of a certain kind of loneliness. Each is easy to notice and impossibly hard to define. This has become one of the deepest puzzles in the study of the mind. Some thinkers describe it as the hard problem of consciousness, not the problem of how the brain processes information. That is difficult, but at least in principle solvable. The hard problem is how any of that processing gives rise to a felt experience at all. Why is there something it is like to be you? Why is there any inner life, rather than just silent machinery? You can describe in great detail what happens when light hits the eye, the cells that respond, the signals sent to the brain, the regions that process color. But at no point in this chain does the description explain why the whole thing feels like anything. Why isn't the entire process simply happening in the dark, without an inner glow of experience? This is not a question science has ignored. Serious thinkers have proposed careful frameworks. Some suggest that consciousness arises when information is integrated in particular ways within a system. Others suggest it depends on certain kinds of complex feedback loops, or on the way the brain models itself, or on some yet unknown feature of physics. Each proposal has strengths, each has limits. None at this point is universally accepted as a full answer. What we can say honestly is this: the question of why there is felt experience at all is one of the most open questions in all of science. It is not a small gap, it is a very old gap, and it may be part of the reason many people across cultures, and across centuries, have suspected that the mind holds something science alone may not be able to fully capture. That is not a defeat for science. It is a moment of humility. Science has taken us extraordinarily far. It has mapped the brain, the body, the deep past of the universe. It has offered explanations for phenomena that once seemed unreachable. And yet, when it comes to why the taste of coffee feels the way it does inside you, we still stand at the edge of a mystery. The watcher we have been walking toward is deeply tied to this mystery. It is the one for whom red is red, coffee is coffee, sorrow is sorrow. Without the watcher, there would be information without experience. With the watcher, information becomes something felt, something lived. Some have wondered whether qualia are the most private things in existence. Only you can truly know what red looks like to you. Only you can know the exact texture of your feelings. Even someone who loves you deeply cannot enter your qualia. They can guess, sympathize, resonate, but the innermost hue of your inner life is closed to every other observer. That is not because they are unwelcome. It is because that is simply how qualia seem to be built. And yet, in another sense, qualia are the most shared thing in existence. Every conscious being, presumably, has their own version. Every dog, every child, every stranger walking past a lit shop window at night. Each carries an inner world of felt experience that will never be seen from the outside. Some have found this thought unexpectedly warming. The stranger you see across a train aisle is not just a set of behaviors, they are a whole universe of qualia, walking quietly beside yours. Tonight, you are inside your own private theatre of qualia, the colour of the darkness behind your eyes, the soft sound of your breath, the very particular flavour of tiredness in your body. All of it is yours. All of it is felt from the inside, in a way that no machine has yet been able to fully explain. The watcher is not the flavour. The watcher is the one for whom there is a flavour. It is the space in which qualia arise, unmistakable, unmeasurable, and yet completely real to the one who experiences them. Some questions may never be fully answered. This may be one of them. But the fact that we can ask it at all, that a small piece of the universe has curled inward enough to wonder why it feels like anything, is itself among the strangest and most beautiful facts we know. If someone asks who you are, notice what happens. Almost automatically, a small story begins. Your name, your work perhaps, your history, a few relationships, a few defining events. From all these threads, a shape emerges, a someone, a me. Now try a strange experiment. Try to say who you are without any story. No name, no history, no roles. What is left? For many people, when they try this, they feel a small unease, because when the story is removed, the self they have been carrying seems to shimmer and then thin. Not vanish exactly, but loosen. This has led some thinkers to a soft and provocative suggestion. Perhaps the self, as we usually experience it, is largely a story, a narrative that the brain assembles continuously, drawing on memory, context, and self-referential thinking. The character in the story feels solid, because the story is very well told. But behind the story, something more mysterious is going on. Researchers who study the sense of self have proposed different models. Some describe a narrative self, the version of you that has a biography, a name, a set of past events strung together in a meaningful order. Alongside this, they describe a minimal self, a simpler, more immediate sense of being here, right now, embodied and present. The narrative self can be edited, revised, and gently rewritten over time. The minimal self is quieter, more constant. It is the mere feeling that experience is happening to someone. The narrative self is often what suffers most. It clings to a version of who it thinks it is, and grieves when that version is threatened. If your work changes, or a relationship ends, or a role you played disappears, the narrative self can feel like it is breaking, and in a way it is. Not because you are broken, but because a story is being rewritten. New sentences must be found, new chapters gently begun. Yet if you look closely during these times, something else is often quietly steady. Something in you notices the story struggling. Something is aware that the character is confused. That noticing is not itself part of the story. It is closer to the minimal self, closer, perhaps, to the watcher we have been walking toward. Some contemplative teachers have suggested that much of human suffering comes from mistaking the story for the truth. We identify so strongly with the character that when the character stumbles, we feel we are ending. But the storyteller is not the story, and beneath the storyteller, quieter still, is the one who hears the story being told. On one hand, the narrative self is deeply valuable. It gives coherence to our lives. It allows us to make plans. It preserves the meaning of our relationships. Without a self-story, everyday functioning would be difficult, perhaps impossible. On the other hand, when we identify too rigidly with the narrative, small setbacks become catastrophes. The story becomes armor. The armor becomes a prison. There is a soft freedom in noticing that the self is at least partly a story, because stories, unlike stones, are flexible. They can be revised without breaking the storyteller. Chapters can end, characters can grow, a life can turn in unexpected directions, and the story can gently rearrange itself without the underlying awareness ever being harmed. Some have gone further and wondered whether the self, at its deepest level, might be entirely a story, a beautifully sustained illusion produced by a brain that specializes in narrative. Others push back, suggesting that this framing misses something, because if the self is entirely a story, they ask, who or what is the audience? Who is aware of the story? A story with no listener would not be experienced as a story at all. This tension is one of the interesting places where philosophy and neuroscience meet. Both take the question seriously. Neither has a final answer. It remains, honestly, one of the open mysteries about what we are. What we can say gently is this: the you that appears in conversation, that fills out forms, that carries a job title and a set of memories, that you is at least partly a story, and that story is real in the way stories are real. But it is not necessarily the whole of what you are. Beneath it, or around it, or through it, something quieter is present, something for whom the story exists. Tonight, you can let the story loosen for a while. The day's roles, the year's expectations, the decade's plans, they can all rest. You do not have to keep the character together while you sleep. In fact, sleep will gently rewrite parts of the story on its own. Memories will be edited. Small integrations will happen without your effort, and through it all, something in you will remain. Something that has been present through every chapter, every revision, every version of the story you have ever told about yourself. That something will be here when you wake. It has always been. It is here, quietly, even now. There is an old idea, offered gently by some contemplative traditions, that unsettles many people when they first hear it. It suggests that the solid self we carry around inside us may not be quite as solid as it seems. The idea is often associated with Buddhist thought, though it appears in variations across many contemplative paths. In one form, it is called anatta, sometimes translated as not self. It is not the claim that you do not exist. It is something subtler. It suggests that the small fixed I you feel yourself to be is not a single unchanging thing, but a shifting bundle of experiences, sensations and thoughts that we tie together into the sense of a person. Consider your body. Cells die and are replaced. Almost every atom in your body was somewhere else a while ago and will be somewhere else again. Yet you feel continuous. Consider your mind. Thoughts arise and pass. Emotions come and go. Beliefs change over decades. And yet, you feel like the same you. Something binds all of it. But what? Anatta gently suggests that what we call the self is more like a river than a rock. A river is real. You can point to it, name it, love it. But if you look closely, it is made of water that is always different. It has no single, unchanging body. It is a pattern of movement, endlessly renewing. So, perhaps, is the self. This is offered here as one philosophical possibility, not as a settled truth. Many people, from many traditions, have felt drawn to it. Others prefer other frameworks. There is no need to choose tonight. What is worth noticing is how this old idea resonates with certain modern observations. Neuroscientists studying the brain have not found a single self-object anywhere inside it. They have found processes, networks, patterns, activity. The unified feeling of being one continuous self appears to be produced, moment by moment, by these underlying processes. It is not, so far as anyone can currently tell, a separate entity inhabiting the brain. Meditation researchers have gently observed that people who practice certain contemplative techniques for long periods sometimes report a loosening of the felt sense of self. It doesn't disappear. They still know their name, they still care for their loved ones, they still notice their preferences, but the tightness around me softens. The sense of being a small, defended someone inside a body becomes less rigid. Something more spacious, they often say, remains. This is not framed here as a spiritual claim. It is one report, offered by many practitioners, echoed in cautious language by researchers. Whether such reports reflect a deep truth about consciousness or a change in how the brain constructs self-referential experience remains genuinely open. If the self loosens without disappearing, what is left? Some traditions say what remains is awareness itself, not a personal self, but a bare, open presence, no longer tightly identified with the story. Others simply speak of a wider, quieter form of being. Whatever words are used, the descriptions have a family resemblance. They speak of relief, of gentleness, of a strange sense of finally being at ease in one's own life. It is worth being careful here. This ancient whisper of no self is not a message that you are nothing. That would be a misreading. It is closer to a message that the you we defend so tightly may not be the you we actually are. Beneath the defensive small self, something wider is quietly present, and that something is not diminished by the ordinary struggles of life. One does not have to accept any particular metaphysical view to notice this experientially. You can simply sit for a moment, tonight, and see what happens when you stop trying to hold the sense of self together. Not to erase it, just to loosen your grip. You will find that things continue, breath continues, sensations continue, awareness continues, and often a quiet spaciousness appears where before there was only a tight little me. This is a hint of what these traditions have been pointing to for a very long time. Not a doctrine to memorize, not a belief to adopt, just an invitation to look, gently, and see for yourself. Some have wondered whether this is what many mystical experiences have in common. A brief loosening of the small self, a broader identification with awareness itself. Different traditions clothe this in different language. Some speak of union with a divine presence. Some speak of oneness with the universe. Some speak of simply resting in the true nature of mind. Whatever the wording, an old thread runs through them. The self, taken very seriously, has a soft mystery at its center, and what remains when that mystery is honored is not less than a self. It is often described as more. Tonight, you do not need to solve this. You only need to notice that the tight little I you carry around all day is quietly softening as your body prepares for rest. That softening is not danger. It is a nightly gentle version of what these traditions have described. Every night, without ceremony, the small self loosens, and something quieter goes with you into the dark. Every great tool has a limit. A microscope can reveal the tiniest cells, but it cannot show you the meaning of what it magnifies. A telescope can gather the light of galaxies, but it cannot tell you why the sky is beautiful to look at. Science, in its careful patience, can measure many things, but there is at least one place where its instruments quietly fall short, and that place is precisely the one we have been walking toward all night. Science studies the world by observing it from the outside. It builds tools, it designs experiments, it measures, it compares, it confirms and adjusts. This method has been extraordinarily powerful. It has taken us from mistaking planets for wandering gods to landing gentle robots on distant worlds. But the very structure of the method assumes a certain distance between the observer and the observed. There is a scientist, and there is a phenomenon. They are separate, and the scientist studies the phenomenon from outside. Now consider what happens when the phenomenon under study is the observer itself. Consciousness is the awareness that reads the instruments. It is the seeing that looks through the microscope. It is the thinking that designs the experiment. When we try to study consciousness, we run into a strange loop. The tool we would use to study it is itself made of consciousness. There is no place outside to stand. There is no neutral ground. This does not mean consciousness cannot be studied at all. Many careful researchers spend their lives probing it from the outside, mapping its correlates in the brain, describing its behaviors, exploring its edges. Much has been learned, much more, no doubt, will be learned. But the innermost core of the question, what awareness itself is, from the inside, resists being fully captured by any external measurement. Some have called this the explanatory gap. Others have called it the hard problem. Whatever we call it, it points to a humbling truth about our tools. When the thing we are trying to understand is the very thing doing the understanding, we may run into a limit that is not just temporary. It may be built into the situation itself. This is not a defeat. It is more like a doorway. It invites us to hold the mystery of consciousness with a certain intellectual humility, to acknowledge that not everything can be measured, and not everything that resists measurement is therefore unimportant. Some of the most valuable things in a life, love, grief, wonder, the taste of a favorite meal, the shape of an old memory, are precisely the things that cannot be fully caught in numbers. Different thinkers respond to this in different ways. Some suggest we will eventually invent new methods, new sciences, new languages that will bring consciousness fully into view. Others suggest that consciousness may be a fundamental feature of reality, in a way similar to how mass or space or time are fundamental, not reducible to something more basic, but part of the ground floor. Others still remain quietly agnostic, content to explore without needing to declare a winner. All of these positions can be held with grace. None require you to abandon curiosity. None require you to close the door on wonder. In fact, holding the mystery loosely may be one of the truest scientific attitudes, a willingness to sit with the question longer, without rushing to any conclusion. There is also a soft reminder here. Science describes the how of many things beautifully, but the ultimate why of existence, the deeper questions about meaning, origin, and purpose, are not usually within its scope. That does not mean these questions are unimportant. It means they may live in a different room, one that science can visit as a respectful guest, but not fully occupy. Some have suggested that the presence of the Watcher within us is a gentle hint that the universe is not simply a stack of mechanical processes, but something that also, somewhere, knows itself. Whether that is because awareness is fundamental, or because it emerges under certain complex conditions, or for reasons we have not yet imagined, remains genuinely open. Different traditions and different thinkers offer different possibilities. Tonight, they can all rest side by side, without needing to fight for the last word. What is beautiful is that even the limit of science is not a wall, it is a soft edge. On this side of the edge, careful measurement, honest experiment, patient observation. On the other side, direct experience, contemplation, wonder, and quiet openness to what cannot be fully spoken. Both sides are needed. Both sides contribute to what a full human life can hold. There is a kind of relief in acknowledging this. You do not need to have every answer to rest well. You do not need to resolve every mystery before closing your eyes. The universe is not asking you to fill in every blank. It is asking, perhaps, only that you notice the presence within you that has been reading these lines, and let that presence be enough for tonight. Some questions are meant to be lived, more than answered. This may be one of them. And whatever the ultimate truth turns out to be, the Watcher inside you does not seem to mind waiting. There is a series of experiments, quiet and now decades old, that many people have never heard of, but that gently rearrange one's sense of what a self might be. They are called the split brain studies, and what they suggest is one of the strangest and most subtly moving discoveries about the mind. The human brain has two hemispheres, a left and a right, connected by a thick bridge of nerve fibers. In most people, these two halves communicate constantly, weaving together a single, seamless experience of the world. But in the mid-20th century, certain patients underwent a delicate surgery in which this bridge was cut. The purpose was medical, to help control severe seizures, and when the procedure was done, the two halves of the brain could no longer easily share information. At first glance, the patients seemed remarkably unchanged. They walked, talked, held jobs, laughed with family. But in carefully designed experiments, something startling began to appear. If an image was shown only to the right side of the brain, and the patient was asked what they saw, the patient's mouth, controlled largely by the left side, would sometimes say, I saw nothing, yet the left hand, controlled largely by the right side, could correctly point to a picture of the item. One half of the brain seemed to know something, the other half was unable to report. Even more striking, when asked to explain their own actions, patients often produced confident, plausible-sounding stories that were, in truth, made up by one hemisphere without any real knowledge of what the other had done. The left hemisphere, which handles most language, appeared eager to give an explanation, even when it did not actually know the reason. The mind, it seemed, had a small storyteller who preferred any narrative to no narrative at all. For some scientists and philosophers, these findings raised a haunting question. If one brain, gently divided, could act like two centers of experience, each with its own view of the world, its own responses, its own capacities, then what did it mean to say that one person, one self, one watcher, lived inside a normally connected brain? Was the sense of a single self a beautiful cooperation between two very different hemispheres? And if so, what happens when they no longer cooperate? The answers, to this day, remain gently debated. Some argue that split-brain patients still have a unified consciousness in most everyday situations, and that the strange lab findings reveal only special conditions. Others believe the experiments hint at a subtler picture, in which our sense of a single self is itself a construction that can, under unusual circumstances, come apart. The truth is likely somewhere quietly in between, and honest researchers are still exploring where the line falls. What is undeniable is the quiet wonder of these findings. Two hemispheres, each capable in different ways, each contributing something to the whole. In a normally connected brain, they blend so seamlessly that we notice nothing. We experience one world, one point of view, one center. Yet inside the skull, something more layered is happening than we usually realize. Consider a small, gentle version of this at home. Have you ever noticed a moment in which your right hand seemed to know something your conscious mind did not? Reaching for a doorknob at exactly the right time, or catching a falling object faster than you could have thought to try? Have you ever driven a familiar route and arrived without remembering the drive? Some part of you handled it, some part continued to watch the road, and yet the reporting self, the storyteller, was elsewhere, thinking about tomorrow. These are not signs that you are two people. They are gentle reminders that the you we experience is likely a beautiful cooperation of many quiet participants, different regions, different rhythms, different specialties. When they are working well together, the whole feels like one. When they diverge, small strangeness appears. This does not have to be unsettling. In fact, there is a soft freedom in it. If your sense of a single self is more of a collaboration than a solid object, then when you feel divided, one part wanting rest, another part still restless, one part longing for something, another part afraid, you can meet these movements with more kindness. You are not failing to be one thing. You are being what you are, a many-layered being, quietly held together by an awareness that includes all of your parts. Some have wondered, tentatively, whether the watcher in each of us is even more mysterious than we have imagined. Perhaps it is not a small central spotlight, but a wider field that emerges from the whole system, in which the many parts of the brain contribute their own small notes to a shared inner music. When one part is temporarily louder, we feel one way. When another part rises, we feel another. Yet the underlying openness, the space in which all the notes are heard, remains. Split brain findings, taken gently, are not a threat to the idea of a witness within you. They are an invitation to imagine that witness in a more generous shape. Not a tiny pilot in one small seat, but something wider, quieter, capable of holding many voices at once. Tonight, as your two hemispheres continue their gentle conversation beneath the surface, you can rest. You do not need to force them into perfect agreement. Whatever they are exchanging, the watcher is aware of all of it, without effort. And somewhere in that unhurried listening, sleep quietly begins to gather. There is a strange, almost miraculous procedure that millions of people experience each year, and yet almost no one who has undergone it can describe what happened during it. A doctor speaks, a needle glides in, someone counts backward, and then, without warning, the world simply ceases. No dreams, no sense of passing time, no memory of anything at all. And then, seemingly a moment later, a voice is speaking again, though hours have gone by. General anesthesia is one of the great quiet mysteries of modern medicine. It is not sleep. It is not unconsciousness in the usual sense. It is something more thorough, something more absolute. It is, in a way, the disappearance of experience itself. For most of history, this kind of vanishing was mostly encountered through injury or death. Then, in the last century and a half, humans learned to produce it safely, on purpose, for the sake of surgery. Whole complex operations became possible because the mind of the patient could be gently switched off. From the outside, the body continues, breathing, heart, muscles, but inside, if the word inside still applies, there is, apparently, nothing. For scientists interested in consciousness, anesthesia offers a quiet, natural experiment. Something is present when the patient is awake. That something changes as anesthetic drugs enter the bloodstream. Certain patterns of communication between regions of the brain change. Long-range coordination softens. The brain still has activity, but a certain kind of unified, richly connected activity fades, and experience, so far as anyone can tell, fades with it. This has led some researchers to propose that consciousness may depend on particular kinds of large-scale integration in the brain. When the parts of the brain talk together in the right ways, experience appears. When those conversations are muted, experience quietly dims. Anesthesia does not seem to shut off the brain. It seems to change how the parts of it are able to communicate. Yet even here, honest researchers admit that we do not fully understand what is happening. We can describe the outward effects, we can describe some of the neural changes, but precisely why consciousness fades when it does, and why it returns as smoothly as it does, remains an open question. It is one thing to observe that certain patterns of activity accompany awareness. It is another to explain how or why they generate awareness at all. There is something quietly humbling in thinking about this. Every so often, in a life, you may be placed into that deep, dreamless state. The self you carry around all day, with its opinions, its plans, its fears, appears to be entirely absent, and yet, later, you are here again. The story resumes, the character continues, as if nothing had interrupted anything. Some have wondered what this tells us about the watcher. If awareness can vanish so completely under anesthesia, is the watcher truly always here, or does the watcher too sometimes go dark? Different thinkers respond differently. Some suggest that during anesthesia, the watcher is genuinely gone, in the sense of ordinary conscious awareness. Others suggest that some more subtle background presence may remain, one that does not leave clear memories behind, but does not fully cease. This remains a matter of gentle uncertainty, rather than firm answer. What is not in doubt is how strange the experience of returning is. Many people describe waking from anesthesia as unlike ordinary waking. There is no sense of having been asleep. There is no felt duration. The moment before the drug entered and the moment of waking press against each other, as if the intervening hours never existed. In a way, it is as if a small piece of your life was quietly removed, without leaving any story to hold in its place. And yet, when you woke, you did not doubt that you were still you. Your name, your loves, your habits, your body, your history, all returned. The story picked up seamlessly. The narrative self reassembled itself as if nothing had happened. This suggests that whatever you are not stored in the noise of ongoing thought. You can be paused entirely and resume entirely. Something else is holding your continuity beneath the level of the moment-by-moment stream. This is one of the quietly moving lessons of anesthesia. It shows us that the self, on some level, can survive a period of total inner silence. When you wake up, you do not have to be rebuilt from scratch. Your body remembers you. Your relationships remember you. Your patterns and preferences remember you. The stage returns to its familiar shape, and the play continues. Some have wondered whether the same might be gently true in other forms of deep loss of consciousness, deep sleep, certain kinds of coma, and, in different frameworks, other states we cannot easily explore, not to remove the mystery, but to invite gentleness in how we think about it. Anesthesia hints that the fabric of experience is more layered than we know. Presence can loosen and return. What we call the self is not fragile in the way we sometimes fear. There is no need to draw dramatic conclusions from this, only to notice, quietly, that even in the deepest silences of the mind, something has always come back. This is not proof of any specific belief, but a soft, human observation drawn from millions of surgeries and returns. Tonight, as your body drifts toward its own gentle vanishing into sleep, you can trust the softness of that pattern. You have been here, you will be here, and whatever it is that survives even the deepest quiet, it is preparing once again to rest. Not all shifts in the sense of self require a hospital. Some happen in the middle of an ordinary day, without warning, in the quiet of a moment, and they leave the person quietly changed. Consider someone deeply absorbed in a task they love, a painter, brush in hand, so focused that the world beyond the canvas has faded, a musician playing something they know so well that fingers move without thought, a runner in the middle of a long stretch of trail, breath and steps folded into one rhythm. Ask them, afterward, what they experienced. Often they will describe something strange. For a while, they say, they were no longer really there, or rather, they were more there than usual, but the small me, who usually narrates everything, had quietly stepped aside. Researchers who have studied this often call it flow. In flow states, self-referential thinking softens. The activity and the person seem to become one. Effort feels effortless. Time slips, and afterward, people frequently describe a sense of having briefly touched something they cannot quite name. Not a mystical vision, necessarily, just a lighter, freer, more open way of being alive. Something similar can happen in moments of awe. Standing on a shore looking at an immense body of water, watching a mountain range at dawn, gazing at a starlit sky in a place with no city lights, the self, for a moment, feels small, not in a diminishing way, but in a spacious way. There is more world than usual, and less me. Some researchers have found that experiences of awe are consistently associated with reports of reduced self-focus. The tight little eye quietly loosens in the presence of something vast. Then there are more intense variants. Some people, during profound experiences of grief, love, or even simple stillness, describe brief moments where the ordinary sense of being a separate self dissolves entirely. These moments are sometimes called experiences of self-transcendence. They can be shocking in their beauty and difficult to translate into words. Something in them communicates that we may not be quite as separate as our daily life seems to imply. Contemplative traditions have long described states like these, using language like unity, oneness, or non-dual awareness. In such states, the boundary between self and world softens. The watcher and the watched briefly seem to be one. This is not confusion. It is often described as a kind of clarity. People who report such experiences frequently say they returned changed, gentler, less anxious about their own smallness. Modern research has offered cautious support for the reality of these experiences. Brain imaging studies of experienced meditators, of people undergoing therapies that involve altered states in supervised settings, and of individuals who report moments of ego dissolution, all reveal similar quiet shifts. The default mode network, that hum of self-referential activity we visited earlier, tends to become less dominant. Communication between regions changes, and subjective reports converge on themes of expanded awareness, reduced ego, and a soft sense of union. It is important to hold all of this gently. Individual experiences vary enormously. Interpretations differ. Some see these states as glimpses of a deeper truth about reality. Others see them as revealing something about how the brain constructs the self, under conditions where its usual patterns loosen. Both interpretations can be held with respect. Both agree that what we call the self is more flexible than daily life suggests. There is a soft freedom in knowing this. If the tight little I that carries you around all day can loosen, briefly, in a piece of music, or in a wide sky, or in the presence of a beloved face, then the I is not the whole story of who you are. Something quieter is present through these dissolutions. The watcher we have been walking toward does not vanish when the small self does. In many reports, it is precisely in those moments that the watcher becomes more, not less, present, free of the story, awareness sometimes shines a little more openly. Consider a small familiar version. Have you ever laughed until you cried and forgotten, for a moment, everything you were worrying about? Have you ever sat with a small child, or an animal, or a friend, in complete comfortable silence without needing to be anyone in particular? Have you ever listened to a song that was somehow more true than you expected and felt the boundaries around you gently ease? These are quiet, everyday cousins of the deeper self-dissolutions. They are hints, small openings. The watcher, briefly, is not defended by the story. It is worth adding that these experiences are not required. Not everyone has dramatic moments of ego dissolution. Not everyone should seek them. Life is not measured by peak experiences. The watcher is not more real when the small self happens to soften. It is here even when the small self is tight, worried and awake at 3 in the morning. Its presence does not depend on how spectacular the moment feels. It depends on nothing. Still, if you have ever known one of these moments, even briefly, you carry a small private confirmation of what these old traditions have been pointing at. The small self is not the ceiling. There is more, and it is not far away. It sits just behind the ordinary noticing you are doing right now. Tonight, no dramatic dissolution is being asked of you. Only a small softening of grip. The story of who you have to be can rest for a while. And underneath, quiet and unbothered, the watcher will still be present, waiting, as always, without needing anything. Not every softening of the self is welcome. There are gentler and more difficult versions of the way our sense of I can shift, and it feels right, tonight, to speak of one of the more difficult ones with real care. Some people, at some points in their lives, experience something called depersonalization. It is a state in which the ordinary feeling of being connected to one's own thoughts, one's own body, or one's own emotions quietly loosens, not because of any spiritual practice, and not always because of any obvious cause. It can appear during periods of stress, exhaustion, or trauma, or sometimes on its own, and it can be deeply disorienting. People who have felt it often describe a strange doubling. Their thoughts continue, but feel like someone else's. Their voice sounds not quite theirs. Their reflection in a mirror seems oddly unfamiliar, even though nothing has changed in the mirror. They function, they walk, they speak, but a sense of being fully inside their life has thinned. It can be quiet, mild, and briefly passing, or, for some, it can be intense and long-lasting. In more difficult forms, it becomes a mental health condition that deserves care and support. Why bring this into a gentle conversation about the watcher? Because these experiences, difficult as they are, quietly reveal something about the layered architecture of the self. When the ordinary sense of being connected to one's own thoughts thins, it becomes visible that this sense was constructed all along. The seamless feeling of, these are my thoughts, this is my life, is not automatic. It is being produced, moment by moment, by the mind. And when the machinery that produces it hiccups, we see, in a strange way, what was always going on beneath the surface. Researchers who study depersonalization sometimes describe it as an unusual state of self-awareness. In many cases, brain systems involved in emotional processing and bodily sensation seem to become subtly less coordinated with systems involved in self-reflection. The result is a sense of watching oneself from a slight distance, of noticing everything happening, but feeling less woven into it. Something in the person is still perceiving, something is still aware, but the ordinary warmth of ownership has cooled. It is important to hold this with compassion. Depersonalization can be frightening. People who experience it sometimes worry that they are losing themselves or losing their minds. In truth, they are usually not. Often, the experience is a temporary reaction to overwhelm, or a signal that the mind is trying, in its own way, to protect itself from more than it can handle at once. With care, understanding, and often gentle support, these states usually soften and resolve. But there is a quiet insight here, offered with sensitivity. Even in the most disorienting version of this state, one thing is unusually clear to the person going through it. They are still aware. They may feel disconnected from their thoughts, but they know they are thinking. They may feel unfamiliar to themselves, but they know they are experiencing that unfamiliarity. Something has continued to watch, even as the ordinary sense of ownership has loosened, and in many cases, This watching has become almost too visible, too raw, too present. Some contemplatives, gently and respectfully, have noticed that this state resembles, in a difficult mirror image, what certain contemplative practices attempt to invite intentionally, in a healthy and grounded way: the recognition that one's thoughts are not oneself, the realization that awareness stands slightly apart from the content of experience, but the difference is enormous. In a well-supported contemplative context, these recognitions arrive alongside safety, stability, and a warm relationship with life. In depersonalization, they can arrive suddenly, unwanted, and without a stable ground beneath them. The lesson is not that depersonalization is spiritual. It is that the everyday, warm, embodied sense of self we usually enjoy is more of a subtle achievement than we realize. It depends on many quiet systems working together. When they falter, life can feel strange in ways that are hard to describe. And when they are well, life feels self-evidently one's own, in a way we rarely stop to appreciate. If you have never known this experience, this is offered as gentle information about the range of human minds. If you have known it, this is offered as recognition and comfort. You are not broken. You are not going to disappear. The awareness that has always been here is still here. Even in the strange distance, it is still your awareness, and with care, with time, and often with support, the warmth of belonging to your own life tends to return. Some who have moved through such experiences and out the other side describe an unexpected gift. Once they knew, in their own body, that the ordinary sense of being a self could loosen and reassemble, the tight little I they had once defended so fiercely no longer felt quite so absolute. They came back into life with more compassion for themselves, and often more compassion for others who quietly struggle with similar things. The mind that watches its own illness is still a mind. It is still deeply human. It is still, in its own trembling way, a witness. And the watcher inside that witness, the quiet awareness within all of us, has not moved. It has simply been seen more clearly than usual. Tonight, you can rest gently. Whatever your relationship with your own inner life has been, the presence that has walked with you this far is still here. It has always been. It is not going away. We have been circling something all night, softly. The presence that watches, the awareness that observes, the one who has been listening to every thought, every dream, every self-story, every silence. And now we come to one of the boldest and most speculative ideas about what it might be. Some thinkers have gently proposed that awareness may not be a late addition to the universe, not a curious accident that appears only when brains reach a certain complexity, but something more basic, something woven in some way into the fabric of reality itself. This idea has different forms. In philosophy, one version is sometimes called panpsychism, the suggestion that some very simple, undeveloped form of experience might be present, in some sense all the way down, not in the sense that a rock has thoughts, not in the sense that a river feels feelings, but that whatever it is that makes rich human consciousness possible may not come from nothing. Instead, it may be a highly developed, highly organized version of a more basic property that is present, in some vanishingly simple form, throughout the natural world. This is not a claim from any particular tradition. It is a speculative philosophical framework, offered by some careful thinkers as one way to make sense of a very deep puzzle. If consciousness is entirely absent everywhere in nature, they ask, how does it suddenly appear when matter is arranged into a brain? The transition seems mysterious. Perhaps, they suggest, consciousness never had to appear from nothing. Perhaps it was, in some very quiet form, always here, and complex living beings simply gathered it into something rich enough to know itself. Other frameworks approach the question differently. Some scientific proposals, such as integrated information theory, suggest that consciousness might be closely related to certain kinds of integrated information in physical systems. In such frameworks, any system that integrates information in the right way, to some degree, has some degree of experience. This is a technical proposal, still under debate, but it echoes the older intuition. Awareness might not be a special magic that arrives late. It might be tied to certain patterns of connection that occur, in varying degrees throughout the world. None of this is offered as settled science. These are speculative models. Other thinkers strongly disagree. Some prefer to think that consciousness emerges only in specific complex systems like human brains, and that everywhere else, no experience is present at all. Both camps have thoughtful arguments. Both admit that we do not yet know for sure. The mystery remains genuinely open. What we can honestly say is this: the universe is much stranger and richer than we usually assume. It contains stars, storms, viruses, rivers, thoughts, dreams, and this quiet moment of listening. Somewhere in all this, awareness has appeared, at least in us. Whether it is a rare local wonder or a subtle undercurrent in reality itself is one of the deepest open questions we know how to ask. If awareness is somehow fundamental, then the watcher inside you is not a lonely traveler. It is not a small candle flickering in a vast dark. It is more like a local eddy in a river of awareness that quietly threads through the whole. This is offered as one possibility. Whether it is right, we cannot say tonight, or perhaps ever, but it is a possibility that has been taken seriously by some serious thinkers, and it is worth gently holding in mind as a thought experiment. If, on the other hand, awareness is a rare event, only occurring in creatures with brains of a certain complexity, then what has arisen in you is remarkable in a different way. A small piece of the universe, briefly folded inward enough to know itself. A candle, brief but bright, lit against a vast and mostly silent darkness. Either possibility, honestly held, invites wonder. We should also acknowledge that these questions about awareness bump up against very old, very important human questions about the ultimate nature of things. Different traditions and different worldviews interpret these possibilities differently. Some see them as compatible with the presence of a deeper source or ground of being. Others read them differently. It is not the place of this quiet walk tonight to settle such things, only to hold them with respect and to acknowledge that the questions are not small and the humility they invite is real. What is quietly striking is that the more we look, the less consciousness looks like a small trivial byproduct. It looks like a central puzzle in the story of what exists at all. That does not mean we know the answer. It means we know the question is worth taking seriously. Some scientists, some philosophers, some mystics, and many ordinary people have arrived, in their own ways, at the same soft intuition. There is something here that we do not yet understand, and whatever it is, it does not seem accidental. You do not have to decide what to believe tonight. You do not have to commit to any framework. You can simply hold in an open hand the possibility that the awareness in you is not smaller than the universe, that it may be, in some way we cannot fully name, related to something larger, that the watcher who has been walking beside these words is not just a lonely local flicker, but something with quiet dignity, connected somehow to a bigger picture that no one at present can fully draw. Some questions belong to the daylight of science, some belong to the quiet of the night. This one, perhaps, belongs to both, and it does not need to be finished before you sleep. It is enough that you have looked at it softly and let it settle where it will. Something quiet begins to shift when you truly notice, in your own experience, that your thoughts are not you, not as a slogan, not as an idea you learned from someone else, but as a direct, unmistakable observation right in the middle of your own mind. You are not the anxious thought that arrived a few minutes ago about tomorrow. You are not the small memory of an old embarrassment that surfaced last night. You are not the endless commentary that ran through your head today about work, or a message, or a person. All of these came, all of these went. Something in you saw them all. Psychologists who work with mindful attention have described a small skill related to this. They sometimes call it cognitive diffusion, a gentle unhooking from the belief that every thought must be believed. It does not involve suppressing thoughts. It does not involve arguing with them. It involves noticing them as thoughts, rather than as commands, verdicts, or facts. The difference is subtle but real. When you believe every thought, an anxious thought becomes an emergency. When you notice a thought as a passing weather pattern, an anxious thought becomes something to be gently observed. It may still be uncomfortable, but it no longer has to run the entire evening. There is something quietly freeing in this small change, because if you are not your thoughts, then you are not obligated to obey them. You can hear a self-critical thought without becoming a self-critical person. You can notice a fearful thought without organizing your life around the fear. You can watch a repetitive worry loop appear once, twice, 30 times in a night, and simply say, softly, "Ah, this again," and let it drift. Some people, upon first hearing this, worry that it means dismissing their inner life. It does not. Thoughts and feelings still matter. They often carry real information, but there is a difference between being buried by them and being with them. The watcher we have been walking toward is the part of you that can be with a thought rather than under it. There is a quiet, everyday example. Imagine standing outside on a windy day. Leaves are moving through the air, sometimes gently, sometimes in gusts. You are standing there, feeling the wind. You are not the leaves, you are not the wind. You are the one watching. The leaves come, the leaves go. The sky remains open behind them. Your thoughts, at their most persistent, are a little like this. They pass through the sky of your awareness. They can be many, they can be loud, they can at times seem to fill everything, but they are not the sky. And the sky, more likely than not, is closer to who you actually are. At night, this shift can be especially kind. Insomnia often thrives on the belief that the thoughts spinning in your head are urgent, meaningful, and must be resolved before rest can begin. When you gently notice that they are, right now, simply thoughts, mental events that will pass whether you engage them or not, some of the pressure quietly leaves the room. You do not have to solve the day. You do not have to answer every worry. You can let the leaves blow. The sky is still here. There is another layer. When you stop believing you are your thoughts, something surprising can happen. You often become gentler with them. Because you are no longer defending yourself against every mental event, you can afford to listen to them, briefly, with curiosity rather than fear. Sometimes, listen to gently, a repetitive thought softens on its own. It came, it seems to be heard, and once quietly noticed, it moves along. This does not mean every difficult thought will vanish on command. Some remain, some circle back. Life includes real problems, real losses, real questions that deserve real attention. But even in the middle of those, the discovery that you are not identical to every thought about them can lighten a load that no argument could ever lift. Some contemplative teachers describe this as coming home to yourself. You have been living all these years in your own mind, but perhaps mostly under your thoughts, rather than beside them. When you begin to rest as the watcher instead, life does not become empty, it becomes more spacious. There is more room around each thought. There is more room around each feeling. There is more room around you. Tonight, you do not need to do anything with the thoughts still passing through. You do not need to fight them. You do not need to save them. You only need to notice, quietly, that they are passing, and that something in you is here, watching them pass. That something is not tired the way the thoughts are tired. It has been fresh all day. It is fresh now, and it is entirely willing, if you will let it, to be your soft companion through the night ahead. Feelings, unlike thoughts, do not stay only in the head. They live in the whole body. Joy warms the chest. Grief hollows the belly. Anger tightens the shoulders. Love opens the throat. Fear cools the hands. Emotions are one of the deepest ways in which the human being knows itself alive. And yet, even here, the watcher is present. Underneath every feeling, however strong, something is quietly observing. Not distant, not cold, just present, aware that a feeling has arrived, aware that a feeling is deepening, aware that a feeling is slowly loosening its grip. Researchers who study emotion have gently found that feelings, however powerful, do not usually last as long as we imagine. A wave of anger, if not fed by new stories about it, tends to peak and decline within minutes. A wave of sadness may arrive, saturate the body, and then, without any particular effort, begin to fade. Emotions have shapes. They swell, they plateau, they dissolve. They are more like weather than climate. What often extends them is the mind. When a feeling arrives, the storytelling self quickly begins to explain it. It builds a case, it replays the causes, it imagines the consequences, and in doing so, it feeds the feeling with new material, so that the wave, which might have naturally passed, keeps being refreshed. In this way, a small pang of loneliness can become an hours-long ache, not because the underlying feeling is that persistent, but because the mind keeps offering it more to hold on to. The watcher does not do this. The watcher does not feed the wave and does not shove it away. It simply notices. When you are able to rest as the watcher during an emotion, even a strong one, something interesting happens. The feeling is still felt, sometimes deeply, but the extra layer, the narrative amplification, softens. The wave has permission to move through in its own natural time. There is nothing cold in this. Watching a feeling does not mean refusing to be moved by it. Grief can still bring tears. Joy can still bring laughter. Love can still shake the whole body. The watcher does not eliminate feelings. It hosts them. It gives them a spacious room in which they can be fully themselves. Consider grief gently. When someone we love is gone, waves of loss can rise for months, sometimes years. It is one of the hardest experiences a human being knows, and yet, in the middle of it, something in the grieving person continues to notice. It notices the ache. It notices small moments of unexpected laughter. It notices the strange way life keeps moving, even when everything feels stopped. That noticing is the watcher, quietly staying present with what cannot be fixed. Some who have moved through deep grief describe this in tender words. They say they never stopped feeling, but at some point they noticed a quieter layer of themselves that had been with them through the whole grief, unbroken. That layer had not been ruined by the loss. It could not be. It was made of a different material, not indifferent to the loss, but not identical to it. And in the presence of that layer, they found the capacity to keep living, gently, even as sorrow moved slowly through the years. Joy, too, is watched. When something wonderful happens, we sometimes rush to hold it, to make it stay, to defend it against ending. And in doing so, we often miss the fullness of the moment. When the watcher is present, joy can be lived without being clutched. It comes, it fills the room, it moves on. And even after it goes, the watcher remembers the shape of it. Joy remains in a softer form, in the way we now walk in the world. At 3 a.m, when a feeling is loud and unwelcome, a worry that will not go, a sorrow that has returned, you can very gently remember the watcher, not to escape the feeling, but to be less alone in it. You are not the whole storm. Something in you is also the room around the storm. The room is patient. The room is here. It does not run out of space. Some have said that emotional maturity is not the absence of feelings, but the deepening capacity to be with them without being swept fully away. In that sense, resting as the watcher is a small, quiet form of this. You feel what is true, you allow what is true, and you let it move without insisting that it stay or leave on any particular schedule. Tonight, whatever quiet emotions may be moving through you, you do not have to solve them. You can let them be here, and the watcher can be here with them. They will pass in their own soft rhythm, and you, deeper than the passing, will remain. For most of the day, our attention points outward, toward tasks, screens, people, sounds. Even when we think about ourselves, we usually point attention towards some object of thought, a memory, a plan, a worry, a self-image. Rarely, if ever, do we turn attention toward the one who is doing the attending. There is an old, gentle practice sometimes described in various contemplative traditions. It goes by different names, but the essence is simple. You do not add anything to your experience. You do not chase any special state. You simply, softly turn attention around so that it rests on itself. Instead of pointing outward at objects, you allow it to notice its own noticing. At first, this can seem impossible. You may feel that you are trying to look at something that cannot be looked at. You may feel that as soon as you try, some new object appears, a thought about the practice, an image of a face, a subtle physical sensation. That is normal. It is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that attention, having lived in an outward direction its whole life, needs a little time to learn a new posture. Meditation researchers have quietly observed that certain practices seem to strengthen the ability to notice awareness itself. Practices in which people are invited, gently and repeatedly, to notice not just their thoughts, but the space in which the thoughts appear. Over time, participants sometimes report a growing sense that awareness has qualities of its own: openness, warmth, stability. that are separable from the passing content. This is not framed as a spiritual claim in the research. It is a report from many practitioners, described in careful language. The practice does not require sitting in any special posture. It does not require chanting or belief in any particular framework. It only requires a small, willing curiosity and a few minutes of quiet. You might try, softly, tonight, as you rest. Notice a thought. Notice a sensation in the body. Then, instead of following the thought or exploring the sensation, gently ask yourself, silently, who is aware of this? Do not look for an answer in words. Simply notice what happens. Very often, attention will briefly loosen its grip on the object, and there will be a soft moment of open presence. That is the direction we are gesturing toward. Not a state to achieve, just a small opening. Attention has been shown, in careful studies, to be trainable in ways somewhat like a muscle. People who practice attention regularly become more able to notice where their minds are, to bring attention back when it wanders, and to rest in more spacious forms of awareness. This is not magic. It is a quiet capacity that any human mind, given kind practice, can slowly develop. There is nothing that must be believed. The watcher is not asking for a religion. It is not asking for a doctrine. It is not asking for a promise. It is simply asking, softly, to be noticed, to be met, occasionally, on its own terms. Contemplatives from many different traditions have gently described what happens when this small turning around becomes more familiar. They speak of a background sense of peace that becomes more accessible during the day. They speak of a gentleness with themselves and others. They speak of a growing intuition that the small worries, while still real, are not the whole story. Life continues to have its difficulties, but something quieter walks beside them. Modern research does not require these traditions to be right in every detail, but it has observed measurable changes in some people who practice such attention turning regularly. Small shifts in how the brain organizes itself, small changes in stress patterns, small differences in how emotions rise and pass. None of this is offered as a promise. Everyone's mind is different. Change is slow. But the possibility that gently turning attention around, again and again, could shape a life over time is one of the quietly beautiful discoveries of contemplative science. You do not need to make this a discipline tonight. Nothing dramatic is being asked. But you might, in a moment of drifting, softly wonder, who is aware of the tiredness in the body? Who is aware of the darkness behind the closed eyes? Who is aware of these very words fading into stillness? Not a name. Not a description, just the small noticing that something is here. That small noticing is enough. It is, in a way, the whole practice. And in noticing, again and again, you slowly become more familiar with the presence that has always been familiar with you. There is a specific hour that many restless minds know well. Not quite the deep of night, not yet the coming of dawn. Somewhere in the middle, somewhere quiet on the outside and loud on the inside. 3 in the morning, more or less. The hour when the body wants sleep and the mind wants to open old files. You may know this hour. If you do, this section is offered gently for you. At 3 in the morning, thoughts can feel unusually sharp. Small worries take on strange weight. A minor conversation from earlier that day expands into an entire chapter. Old regrets return with unexpected freshness. The body is tired. The mind, somehow, is not. There is a common physiological reason for some of this. In the second half of the night, certain stress-related signals in the body can quietly rise. Some people are especially prone to a form of light waking during this time. It is not a flaw, it is one of the ways the human body is built. Yet the difficult part is rarely the physiology alone. It is the sense of being trapped alone with a mind that has decided to spin. It is the feeling that everyone else is safely asleep, and only you are awake with all these thoughts. It is the fear that this will go on for hours. Tonight, if this hour meets you, we would like to remind you softly, you are not alone with your mind. The watcher is here. It has been here through every past 3 in the morning. It is here in this one. It will be here in every one to come. When the mind spins at that hour, the natural instinct is to argue with it, to push the thoughts away, to try to force sleep. This almost never works. The more we struggle, the more the mind treats the struggle itself as important. and the more awake we become. Sleep, it seems, is one of the things that does not respond well to being demanded. The watcher, however, does not need to demand anything. It only needs to notice. In the middle of the night, without lifting the head, without turning on any light, you can, if you like, softly notice, "Ah, my mind is spinning again. Ah, another old memory has arrived. Ah, another version of tomorrow has appeared." Not with judgment, not with alarm, just with a very quiet recognition. In doing this, you are not fighting the mind. You are giving it a companion, and oddly, this companionship often calms things more than any battle could. The thoughts are less lonely, they are seen, they begin to loosen. Some people who have practiced this a while describe a soft shift in their relationship with sleepless hours. They still do not always fall back asleep quickly. Sometimes they lie awake for a while, but the experience is different. It is less like being tortured by an enemy. It is more like being with an anxious friend. The friend is worried. The friend has things to say, and you can simply sit with the friend, listening from the deeper place inside you. There is a quiet observation here. Sleep is often blocked not by tiredness's absence, but by hyper-arousal, a state in which the nervous system is on gentle high alert. It is not personal. It is a pattern the body sometimes falls into. When you meet it with more struggle, the alert deepens. When you meet it with soft, watching presence, the alert slowly begins to soften. Not always fast, not always fully, but often more than we expect. You can also, at 3 in the morning, offer the body a small kindness, a slower breath, a soft attention to the warmth of the bed, a soft acknowledgement that even lying here awake is a form of rest, that the body does not need you to be fully asleep to receive some restoration. That being present in a quiet body, however tired the mind, is not nothing. Some people find comfort in remembering that many other minds across the world are quietly awake at this same hour. Somewhere, a parent is up with a small child. Somewhere, a nurse is between rounds. Somewhere, a fisherman is beginning the day. Somewhere, another restless person, very much like you, is also lying still with their own tender mind. You are one of many quiet lights in the dark. That thought, held gently, can soften the loneliness of the hour, and through it all, the watcher is here, not asking you to sleep, not scolding you for being awake, not building a case against tomorrow, just present, with you, in this small particular version of the night. Tonight, if the hour comes, may it find you a little more gently. May you meet it not as an enemy, but as an old visitor who does not always know how to leave, and may the watcher inside you keep both of you company until the sky, in its own slow way, begins again to lighten. By now, we have walked through many rooms of the same quiet house. The stranger inside your head, the voice that narrates, the gap between two thoughts, the mirror that cannot see itself, the child who first noticing, the dreaming mind, the divided brain, the softened self, the deep silence of anesthesia, different ways of pointing to the same subtle thing, the presence that has been present through all of it. You may not be able to name it, you may not be able to describe it, but you may, quietly, have felt something, a soft recognition, a sense that these words have not been describing something distant. They have been describing something that has been reading them, that something is not a stranger. It has been with you at every moment of your life, in your first cries, in your first laugh, in your quiet childhood afternoons, in the small joys you have forgotten, in the difficult nights you have survived, in this present breath. Some have called it awareness, some have called it consciousness, some have called it presence, spirit, mind, or simply the witness. The words matter less than the recognition. You do not have to argue about vocabulary tonight. You only have to notice that something has been noticing. There is a strange, gentle comfort in this. Whatever you have lost, whatever you have gained, whatever mistakes you have made, whatever kindnesses you have offered, this presence has been the quiet company through all of it. It has not judged, it has not left. It has simply, without asking anything, been here. Life will bring more days. Some will be light, some will be difficult, some will be surprisingly ordinary. Through each of them, this presence will remain. It does not require good conditions. It does not require special practices. It is not a reward for being a certain kind of person. It is not withheld from you for anything you have done or not done. It is simply, quietly, here. Some traditions have said that this presence is what allows love to exist, because to love, you must first be able to notice, to receive, to see, to feel the presence of another. Without this quiet capacity, love could not happen, and with it, even in small, imperfect ways, we manage sometimes to touch each other across the vast distance of separate lives. Some have said that this presence is what allows learning to exist, because to learn, you must first be able to be surprised, to open, to change. Without awareness, no learning could take root, and with it, even in tired minds, new understanding sometimes gently enters. Some have said that this presence is what allows healing to exist, because in the moments when the body or the heart begins to mend, something must be there to gently register the mending. Without a witness, mending would simply be another mechanical process. With a witness, it becomes a small, tender rediscovery of aliveness. All of these are ways of saying, softly, that the watcher is not a curiosity. It is deeply woven into everything that matters in a human life, and it has been in your life, weaving quietly, whether you noticed it or not. You may have spent years without ever really addressing this presence. That is completely fine. It has not been offended. It does not keep score. It does not need to be thanked. But there is a strange sweetness in simply, once in a while, turning gently toward it, nodding inwardly to what has been with you all along. Some have described that inward nod as a small kind of homecoming, not to a place, not to a memory, but to something in themselves that they had, in the busyness of life, quietly forgotten to notice. And in noticing again, they felt a sense of company that no outside thing could quite provide. You are not alone tonight. Beyond any external company, beyond any relationship, beyond any circumstance, you have the company of this silent presence. It has been listening to these words with you. It has been feeling the body soften with you. It has been drifting towards sleep with you. Nothing more needs to be said. Nothing more needs to be done. The watcher does not ask for a promise. It does not ask for a plan. It only asks, quietly, that you rest, tonight, in the knowledge that you have never been alone with yourself. There has always been something gentle here, alongside every thought, every feeling, every version of you. That gentle something is enough, and it will still be enough, tomorrow and the day after, and in every ordinary night to come. We have gathered many threads tonight, different rooms, different angles, different ways of noticing the same quiet mystery. It would be easy to try to tie them into a tidy conclusion, but the mystery does not really tie. It softens, it settles, it stays with you, in whatever way it will. You do not have to remember any of this precisely. In fact, you probably will not. Memory, especially at night, is not built to hold on to sentences. It is built to hold on to the shape of things, feelings, textures, impressions, something that felt true, something that felt gentle, something that felt like company. Researchers who study how the sleeping brain handles ideas have quietly noticed that memory does not simply store during the day and rest at night. Something continues to happen during sleep. Fragments are sorted, connections are made, new links are quietly formed between ideas that once seemed unrelated. In some sense, tonight's exploration will continue without you in the hours ahead. Whatever was useful will settle, whatever was not will drift away. So the ideas we walked through, the watcher, the voice, the gap between thoughts, the dreaming mind, the possibility that awareness may run deeper than we know, you do not have to hold on to them tightly. You can let them go the way you let go of the day. What is meant to stay will stay, in its own way. What is not, will not. Some things, you may notice, have already left a small warm print. A thought may come to you tomorrow, in the middle of a difficult moment. A quiet recognition that the anxious voice is not you. A subtle noticing of the pause between two thoughts. A soft memory that something in you has always been listening. That is how these ideas work. Not by being memorized, by being lived, in unnoticed moments. Nothing here has asked you to believe anything absolute. Different frameworks were offered gently and left where they were, without pushing you toward any of them. You are free, always, to make your own sense of what is here, to hold what feels true, to question what feels uncertain, to carry the mystery with your own personal shape. The one who watches inside you did not require these words to exist. It has been quietly present all along. The words were only small hands, pointing softly, so that you might notice for yourself what was already the case. Now, having noticed, you can put down the hands. The presence remains. There is also room for gentle humility. There is much about consciousness that no one yet understands. The Watcher's ultimate nature is not something we have finished mapping. Perhaps we never will. Some questions, as we said before, seem meant to be lived more than answered. The one at the center of tonight's walk may be one of them. Yet you are not diminished by living inside an unsolved question. Human beings have always lived inside such questions. Every generation has walked gently in the presence of things it did not fully understand, and each generation, in its own way, has found ways to be at peace with the mystery, to live well within it, to love well within it, to sleep well within it. You can rest tonight without needing to have finished anything. The threads can drift where they will. The sleeping brain will do its quiet work, and when you wake, some subtle sense may remain, softer than any sentence, of what was here tonight. Some things in life must be solved. A broken door, a missing key, a misheard message, and some things, quieter and older, do not. The Watcher within you is one of those quieter things. It has been here, without introducing itself, for as long as you have been here, and it will likely remain, without demanding introduction, for as long as you remain. It has not asked to be figured out. It has not required an explanation to be present. It has been offering you awareness without ever charging a fee. We have circled it, tonight, with words. We have leaned on hints from science, from philosophy, from old contemplative traditions. We have looked at it from the side, from above, from below. Each angle showed something. None of them showed everything. That is not a failure. That is a feature. Something that could be fully caught in words would probably not be what we are looking at. There is a strange dignity in leaving a mystery unsolved. It is not laziness. It is not defeat. It is a soft acknowledgement that certain things are larger than the tools we bring to them, that not everything real can be measured, and not everything measurable is real in the way we most care about. Some questions belong to bright light. What time is it? How many minutes until the meeting? Which road is fastest? Others belong to a quieter, older kind of light. Why does the taste of a memory sometimes ache? What is it that watches when I watch? Where does the day go when it becomes a story of a day? These questions do not need to be beaten. They only need to be sat with, gently. You can carry the mystery of the Watcher into your night without needing to defeat it. It is not asking to be defeated. It is asking, more likely, to be quietly welcomed, to be given the small honor of your continued attention. When your attention happens to drift its way, nothing more, nothing less. Some traditions, in their own languages, have suggested that becoming friendly with mystery is one of the softer arts of a whole life, not as resignation, not as giving up, but as maturity, as the gentle willingness to keep walking with what cannot be fully seen. Whether you draw from a spiritual tradition or a philosophical one, or simply your own quiet reflection, this friendship with the unsolved is a rare and beautiful thing. Tonight, you can rest inside the mystery without trying to close it. You can let the Watcher remain, in some ways unknown. You can be an open room in which the unknown is welcome to stay overnight. It has been welcome all your life. It will be welcome tomorrow. There is enormous relief in this. If you have spent parts of your life trying to figure yourself out completely, this can feel almost strange, that you might not have to, that the deepest part of you was never a problem to be solved, that it was, and is, and will be, a presence to be recognized, quietly, once in a while, before returning to the ordinary tasks of a life. You are not required to arrive at a final answer before you sleep. You never were. Notice, if you like, the weight of your body against the surface beneath you, not to change anything, just to notice, where the head rests, where the shoulders soften, where the small of the back meets the bed, where the legs finally lay down whatever they were carrying. The body knows how to sleep. It has done it thousands of times. It does not need instructions. It does not need to be taught. As the mind gently steps back, the body's own quiet system takes over. In its slow, ancient way, small physiological things are already happening. Muscles that were subtly holding on all day are letting go. Breathing is finding its own slower rhythm, one that the body only uses at rest. The heart is quietly stepping down from the pace of the day into something calmer. The processes that carry sleep are not glamorous. They are ordinary. They are unhurried, and they are quietly reliable. You do not have to help. In fact, one of the small mercies of biology is that sleep does not respond to effort. You cannot force it, but you also do not have to. What you can do, softly, is get out of its way. The watcher is very good at this. It watches. It does not push. It does not pull. Attention can rest with the breath now, if that feels natural. The soft rising, the soft settling. There is nothing to fix. There is nothing to solve. Whatever thoughts still visit are welcome to pass through. They do not have to be stopped. They do not have to be believed. They are only visitors, and visitors do not stay. The body is heavier than it was when this began. The limbs, if you notice them, may feel further away than they did an hour ago. The blanket, if there is one, is a gentle weight. The room, whatever room it is holding you. Some part of you is beginning to loosen from the day. That is exactly right. That is what is meant to happen. The watcher is not going anywhere. It will still be here in the last moments before sleep, and it will be here when sleep arrives, in whatever quiet form it comes. You are safe to soften now. There is nothing left to complete tonight. The rest can wait for tomorrow, and tomorrow will be met with a body that has finally been allowed to rest. If a thought still passes, that is fine. Let it pass, like a slow cloud. If a small worry appears, that is fine. Let it drift, like the others before it. You are not required to catch anything. You are not required to hold anything. The watcher inside you knows how to be present without effort. It has been doing so all your life. It does not need you to try. It only needs you to allow. And the allowing is happening now, quietly, without needing to be named. Somewhere beneath the mind, beneath the words we have used, beneath the last small pieces of the day, a quiet has been waiting. Not the quiet of an empty room, not the quiet of nothing, a living quiet, a quiet that is aware of itself. It has been waiting all night. It was waiting when the first sentence began. It was waiting when the ideas softened into feelings. It was waiting when the body began to sink into the surface beneath it. It has been waiting your whole life. You do not have to reach for it. You have arrived. That is what all the words were quietly for. Not to bring you somewhere new, only to remind you of a place you have never actually left. The watcher and the watched are softening now. The one who is aware and the awareness are folding gently into one soft field. There is no need to decide which is which. There is no need to hold either apart from the other. They are simply here, together, without effort. Breathing continues on its own. The body rests without needing to be told. Thoughts, if any, are becoming shorter, softer, more transparent, like drops of water reaching the surface of a still pond. Nothing more is being asked. Nothing more is expected. The night is holding you. The presence in you is holding the night. And underneath both, the quiet that was always there is doing what it has always done. Being here, simply being here. There is nowhere else you need to go. There is nothing else you need to become. This moment is enough. And the next moment, whatever it brings, will also be enough. The watcher who has walked with you through every sentence of tonight is still walking with you. Not with words anymore, just with a soft, unbroken presence. You can trust it. You can let it be. You can let yourself be, held inside it. If sleep is close, welcome it. If it is not yet close, welcome the rest that is here instead. Rest and sleep are close cousins. Both are safe. Both are yours. Some things do not need to be said. Some things are said better by silence. Whatever remains of tonight can be said by that. You are not alone. You have never been. The quiet that was always there is here now, gently, without ceremony, without need for anything from you. Just here, just quiet, just kind. Let the eyes rest, if they are not already. Let the thoughts thin, if they are not already. Let the body deepen into the bed. Let the watcher stay, softly, at the edge of everything. The night is long. The night is gentle. The presence is patient. And in a while, without your knowing quite when, sleep will come, and it will find you already at home.